Tic Talk, Tic Talk, Tic Talk, Talk.
A real Celtic talk show by real Celtic fans from the Carluke Shamrock Supporters Club on Hail, Hail Media.
Tic Talk, Tic Talk, Tic Talk, 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 Talk.
Hail, hail, and welcome to Tic Talk with the Carluke Shamrock Celtic Supporters Club. My name is Richard, and this session is being recorded on Monday, the 28th of October 2013. Now, for this very special edition podcast for Tic Talk Show, we have a panel, let's see, from the club, some long-time members and known as the Brothers Grimm, the Connolly brothers. We have Brian and Peter. Good evening, gents.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good lads. Another more legend of the club, I should really say, an elder statesman, pillar of the community. There's all sorts of phrases we could use with this man. Mr Sanderson. Hello, sir.
Hello, and there the money.
Brilliant. We'll be calling on your legendary knowledge throughout this podcast, let me tell you. But why is this special? Well, we have with us a special guest tonight, author of a new Celtic book that we're about to dive into, a chap called Stephen Sullivan. Hello, Stephen.
How you doing? Thanks for having me along.
You made it to Carluke. You found your way.
Yeah,
you were foretelling us of days of yore when you played football and there was all sorts of dodgy characters here scoring against you and you weren't happy.
Memories of this 9-year-old boy when I was playing under 10s football for Busby, scoring from the halfway line and 5 goals a game and things. It was unhappy memories. Nightmares.
Scarred. Scarred for life.
He was 17 at the time.
You looked it.
Allegedly. One of the
One of Saudi Arabia.
The big beard.
And my hair was grey.
Right, so the book. Here you go, chaps.
Yes.
This is it. The legendary tome, as we could call it. It's called, listeners, it's called Sean Fallon, Celtic's Iron Man. We are going to be talking all about that book. We're going to be talking all about the legend within it. But let's kick off with the man that actually wrote the thing. Now, you've been on podcast before. You've met my boss, Chris McGuigan, for the Lost Boys. But this is up another level now. Because Brian, as you know, Tic Talk, we don't mess about. No. This is the real deal here. When we were looking through your wheelie bins, checking your credit scores, we got in touch with a guy who, try and guess who this is. With you, he was known as the other half of the Chuckle Brothers.
Gregor Kyle,
correct. A famous Mr Online Celtic,
great
who
guy.
of course switched to the dark side, went to the Daily Record, tried to save their soul there. So, why were you known as the Chuckle Brothers, first up? You were, of course, with the Celtic View at that time?
I'm not too sure. I seem to remember that we used to try and, after the Monday deadline was out the way, because the weekends used to get a midweek day off, and Paul Cuddy, our boss at the View, used to try and get us to decide which day we're taking off, and we'd be kind of, what do you want, Gregor? What do you want, Stephen? So that would be no doubt why it's, if I'm remembering rightly.
Good man, you need to go on your game here tonight. We've got loads of stuff to catch out on. Also, we mentioned your footballing career just earlier on. A wand of a left foot. That's a quote. A wand of a left foot.
That's too kind, definitely.
And you prepared to tell us about the game of your life. What would that be?
That would be
who was playing?
My first time when I was away with the Celtic View when I was 19, believe it or not, and I'd just been doing work kind of games covering the youth team. That was basically my job at the time. Was I was 19, going away with these fellow 19-year-olds to cover youth games in junior parks. And I got called on Christmas Eve saying, Stephen, how do you fancy going to Portugal with the first team? As you do.
You know what these
Christmas Eve,
benefits are like, Peter.
And this was the Barnstable Goose season. And, Larson was there, and I was just a season ticket holder at the time, and you're away, sharing the same hotel, meals and everything with Larson and Viduka and all these guys. It was just incredible. And Raphael was away, that was his first trip away.
There you go.
So I watched this guy thinking, he must just be lacking in fitness at this stage, there's got to be more to come from this boy, And Stefan Bones and all that, and but it was, at that point things were going really well, and the atmosphere was really good on it. And but anyway, the game was a game of the staff against the press.
Yes,
and
well done.
they organised, and it was kind of John Barnes was picking the team, and we'd been knocking the ball about in the training pitch the day before, and he'd obviously picked up the wrong impression about my ability because he put me up front with Kenny Dalglish for the game.
Kenny Dalglish, he passed over that.
Yeah.
He played football with Kenny Dalglish.
So it was fantastic. I mean,
What surprised me there was that John Barnes had a ball.
Oh, he's off and running. Mr Sanderson's off and running. So a good time. 7 years with the Celtic View. Was it 7?
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah, absolutely. In 2006, I left. So it was great. I mean, because I was obviously Martin O'Neill came after that, and great times to be there. And I mean,
and a good working relationship with the blessed Martin.
He was brilliant, and he was really clever as well. That was the Celtic website was just kind of coming up then, and he was really great in terms of using that. Like you get different managers, I think, who maybe have their favourite pressmen or their guys that they deal with or the ways of putting out information.
Yep.
And he was very much, no, I'm not going to have that. Everything goes through the Celtic View or through the Celtic website. So he was a dream for us. I mean, he was a guy that controlled the whole club. Like he wanted to, when Gordon Strachan started just after him, I didn't work with him for that long, but he'd let you write his programme notes. I don't think I'm betraying any real confidence there, but whereas Martin O'Neill wanted to write his programme notes almost every time, and he'd give you these handwritten sheets. And I think somewhere I've still got the handwritten programme notes from the 6-2 game or something, that way.
Fantastic.
Like stuck away in some drawer, but that was just the way he wanted to control everything. He didn't delegate anything really. I mean, even John Robertson and Steve Walford had their roles in the training ground, but you see from his signings as well, he wanted to watch every player. He didn't have a John Park or whatever that he would trust. He wanted to see these guys in person, and that's why you only got pretty much British-based signings with Martin O'Neill, because he wanted to have a say and control pretty much everything at the club. But the people at Celtic loved him. I mean, like in every department, and he was very good to everyone. Like he'd come round and he'd put a few quid in for a night out at Christmas, and just little touches, just things. And when he left, he came round and spent time with him. He was a genuine guy, really, and very well liked by the staff at Celtic.
Fantastic. Now, Gregor went to the dark side, as I said, with the Red Tops. You, some could say, went to the dark side, into the system. You're working for the man. Can you tell the chaps where you are?
I'm working for FIFA.com, so the FIFA website, yeah.
Steady, Peter, steady, son, steady. Yeah. Internet bampots and a short leash here.
So, I know.
You enjoying that?
It's great. Yeah. It was really good. I mean, when I left in 2006, my first job, basically a couple of months after I started, was to go to the World Cup in Germany. And so you're basically working from Glasgow most of the year, and then there'll be tournaments, and it's not under 20 World Cups, Club World Cups, these kind of things, all the minor tournaments that don't get such futsal, these kind of things. So I missed out on the beach soccer in Tahiti this year. That was a bit of a sad one to miss out on, but no, it's great. It's another great job to have. I've been jamming as anything.
Now, working for the man, are you prepared to make any official statement on the history of a certain club that's died and whether or not that continues, or do you want to do a take the fifth on that one?
I need to take the fifth on that one, because there was a story on the FIFA website that, let's just say, offended them a little bit.
Can I kicked off a few things, right? And is it that you take the fifth on your boss of bosses, Mr Blatter, and his recent stuff? Yeah, as well. Is it okay?
He's a fine man. A fine man.
You know that's what will get to him. They've got ears everywhere.
I just want to know what bung you gave him.
Allegedly, Pierre, allegedly. Right, let's get cracking, let's get into this, because oh my god, I finished this last night, and this will make sense to you. I've read the epilogue with YouTube playing the song The Island of Innisfree behind me. It was fantastic,
absolutely.
Which will kind of chime in with what you know about the man. For the listeners, this is a hardback book of well over 300 pages. If I try and tell you how much is in this, I'd be grasping at straws, to be honest. Peter, that's my notes for tonight.
Well, there's my notes.
There you go.
That was
pages. Fantastic. I have literally pages and pages. Full disclosure, I love the book. If I didn't, I'm not blowing smoke up your backside. If I didn't, I just wouldn't tell you. I would just be nice and polite in an interview. I absolutely love it, because it captures loads and loads of football details and tactics and stats and inside information, but it doesn't bore you to death. It's not a factual book. It's not one of those ones. It's a yawn fest. It's you went for this position in the league to that position in the league. It has, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of people and anecdotes and phrases and quotes and pieces of the puzzle, but it never feels squeezed in. You've kind of peppered it really nicely. There's a beautiful rhythm to it. It's really easy to read. And the thing I really liked about it is, to explain to listeners again, there's golden nuggets throughout the book, because what happens is the font or the text of the book is indented into the middle, so there's wee central sections of text. Every time that happens, that's Sean himself and his direct quotes and his direct memoir, memories and so on, and it's beautiful. So it goes between that. Stephen obviously tells the story and works through all the research we'll no doubt go into, and then all the way through that there's these wee golden nuggets just dropped in with his very own words, and it's just beautiful. I had no idea of about 3/4 of it. It's just, obviously it's an older chap, so it's not from my generation. We've got a legend here that will keep me writing things. Might even dig you up a few things.
Considering, unfortunately, I was in the Middle East when I played for Celtic.
You're in the Middle East. You only heard from it from afar, and there wasn't Twitter back in the days. But honestly, the stories in it just blew me away, and I will try and get through, listeners, as much as I can.
I mean, I've got to say, likewise, they blew me away when I heard them.
It must have.
Really, I mean, that's going through it, because you had an idea when you came into it of the stories you were looking to kind of go into, and then you'd take another tangent altogether, and then, or you'd read something and you think, oh, I need to ask him about that, and I don't think that's ever been explored, and the whole process of going through it blew me away. It really did, and especially going up to see Sean every week, and again, you weren't sure what to expect because he was pushing 90, but as you'll read yourself, his quotes in it, I think they make it, they really absolutely. If it wasn't for him, if it was just a biography with other people speaking, I don't think it would be anywhere near what it is.
Very true. It doesn't add that essence, if you like. Right, I'm going to go through loads of points as I can. I'll tell the listeners when I'm jumping over things, and I will, because honestly we'll be here for like 6 hours if I try and do as much as I can, and that's me cutting out stuff.
It took you reading.
So exactly. So you've got to get this book, guys, especially for your fathers and grandfathers and everything, or if you're just missing parts of your Celtic history, this will knock your socks off. But lead us into the start of it. Celtic View, FIFA.com, we've ticked that off. How did you get dragged into this part, just starting it?
Well, it was it was Martin Gregg, who you've obviously interviewed before. He's from Backpage Press, and he gave me a call one time. He said, can I meet you just to chat about things? And he said, look, we're looking to, as you know, they've got a kind of idea that they want to do real, high quality sports books, and they've done some great stuff already.
The Road to Lisbon was a fantastic book.
I mean, that's Martin's own book, and they've got the Graham Hunter Barcelona book, which done great things for them, and the Alan Gozine book, and just a lot of real, kind of substantial books, I suppose you'd say.
Definitely.
And he said, look, we're looking to do something, really good about Celtic, and he said the idea we've had is Henry Larsson, and so that's how it all started. It was through Henry Larsson, and I said, to be honest, I don't see a Henry. And he maybe thought I would have some kind of in because I worked at the View, and I would know Henrik, and he said we think you could do a good book on it. I said, look, I don't think, unless he was willing to participate in it, I don't really think there's something there. I said, I don't think I've got enough of an insight to do something that people don't already know about him. Right. And I said, but to be honest, I said, if you're looking to do, I'd never really thought about doing a book, to be totally honest. It hadn't been a great ambition. But I said, if you're looking to do a Celtic book, the great untold Celtic story for me is Sean Fallon.
Right, so you knew that, you're coming from that.
Absolutely, right. I spoke to him a few times, and I'd always thought, because there's obviously been, I think everyone in the Lions has had at least one book out, and I think Neil's had about 3, but Sean was there right beside Jock Stein all the way, and plus he had the time before that. I mean, even like the early 60s time, the time that was almost the period I was looking forward to going to more, in the 50s and all the Tullys and all these kind of guys, and I thought, he's only scratched the surface of what this guy knows, and I thought he's just got this incredible insight. With Stein not been around, Stein never did an autobiography, so I said, this guy's got the ultimate insight in such an amazing era. But as I say, it wasn't until then I'd really thought, well, maybe I could do it, maybe actually. And so Martin immediately was really keen.
Right.
And so I put in a couple of calls to the family, and I was wondering if he just hadn't wanted to do one, or if there hadn't been the interest. I thought that was unlikely, and sure enough, there'd been loads of interest and loads of people looking for him to do a book over the years. But he'd always been a bit reluctant. I think when he left Celtic in '78, he'd had the press on to him looking for a story. As you'll know, if you read the book, and offering a lot of money, 30 grand I think it was back then, which is serious money. And he was never paid well at Celtic, so that would have set him up, and he just had his 6th child, so it really would have been useful money. But they were looking for dirt on Stein and on Celtic.
And how they treated him and so on.
I think ever since then, and seeing how other people's books were maybe, a lot of footballers' books, as you know, are just kind of done basically for serialisation, just for a headline in the Sunday Mail, then another headline, another headline. And he thought, that's not what I want to do, I've got no interest in that. And it was only Alex Ferguson was kind of saying, like, you need to do a book, Sean, and kind of wore him down a little bit. and plus he had a lot of young grandkids, and I think he felt, none of them had been alive, none of the grandkids had been alive while his football career was going on and when he was still at Celtic, and he thought it's important I put something down for them, and just, I think he was eventually won over. But when I first contacted him, he'd kind of half been won over, but they'd almost promised it to another publisher, and I thought I'd kind of just missed the boat. But I went up and saw him anyway, and there was... we seemed to kind of get along well, and I'd met him before anyway, and I think he'd be quite happy to deal with me. And I think basically the person that was meant to do it dropped the ball with it. They insisted on, I think again, a bit of scandal, and they lost it basically, and I had this kind of almost this brilliant open goal, and it was just good fortune, and as I say, the family were quite happy to go with me, so that was just fantastic. You can imagine yourself coming up to see Sean Fallon every week,
Exactly, fantastic.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, 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 tock.
Right, so that's how your story started. Sean's, of course, Sligo.
Yeah.
Now, born in it, loved it. That really comes out in the book all the way through it. Father, major part in the whole place. You visited it for research. You've had a recent book launch and so on. Give us a feel for the place. What are we talking? How would you describe Sligo?
It's a fantastic place. I'd never had any great... It's not part of the established Irish tourist trail and things, it's a really lovely place, and I was looking forward to going just from his descriptions, and I thought maybe he's a bit starry-eyed about it,
right.
But I loved it. I mean, a place like Ross's Point, even the drive-in, I flew into Belfast and drove across, and the drive, and there's waterfalls, this valley, and waterfalls coming down and everything. It's beautiful, it really is.
And right on the coast?
Right on the coast, yeah, right on the Atlantic coast, and it's really... I mean, from the early chapters, he was a lifeguard and out patrolling these beaches and really dangerous swimming spots, and that's where he learned to swim out in the Atlantic. And it's rough. I mean, the weather, when the weather turns, it's
about it.
Yeah, but it's a great place, and the people there couldn't have been nicer.
A big place, small place? What kind of population are you talking?
No, I think it's about 20,000.
Any of you guys been at all? You stayed in Sligo? Aye. Part of the club or just a family thing?
Just a family thing.
Aye. You remember much about it? Just a kind of small harbour?
I remember staying in a house in the middle of it. That's all I can remember.
Is that right? Aye.
We stayed in
what kind of ages are you talking? Single digits?
Brian was Sam about 10, 12.
Right.
Brian's probably single digit.
Just kind of nice wee coastal place.
It was a great...
I've been on holiday with Mackay's further up the road.
It was Mackay's, Macaulay's,
right, okay.
and Magawki's.
Oh, jeez, Carlook boys, you get everywhere. Unbelievable.
that trip should actually get put down as a book.
Talk about shambolic tours, I'll tell you.
That was a great trip. Sligo's a lovely place.
Right, kiddo.
How did you manage to get with the Mackays, the Macaulays,
the Magawkies,
and user Conleys?
You're Mr. Mick Conley's.
2 weeks with McConleys.
There you go, game done. Now, Stephen, you touched upon it there about the swimming aspect. Sean Fallon, someone might automatically pick the word footballer, but would that be fair to say sportsman rather than footballer?
Definitely.
I'm thinking of those early chapters specifically.
I found that really amazing. I don't know about yourself. I was always assumed, I knew there was the story about him lying about his age, but I always assumed that he would have been a footballer first and foremost, and the all-round sportsman would have been kind of like side passions.
Yep.
I think he'd been into one of the Irish games when he was
The
young.
Gaelic
Yeah,
stuff,
definitely. That was
Sligo.
That was, and again, I thought that was maybe like a second sport, but basically at one point in basically almost his mid-20s, football was like his third sport. He was a brilliant swimmer. He was an outstanding Gaelic footballer. He played for the county, but at the age kind of almost 26, he was still playing in the Irish Regional League for Longford Town. He wasn't even, at Sligo, not even the League of Ireland yet.
How many clubs he actually played for?
Right.
I'm saying myself, he must have been some easy when he came across.
Probably like his age when he came across.
Oh, see, you're picking up points. Stop jumping ahead. You don't know that much.
Yeah, I mean, and it hadn't been the thing I found amazing was if it hadn't been for the GAA banning, he was basically banned because he was still playing soccer. He weren't allowed to play soccer in those days.
Right, okay.
Am I going on?
That's
cool. Ahead too much here.
What was that called? It was called I read it tonight there. It was called
The actual sport?
there was something of a negative ban or something. They called it something.
I know. I think Sean just knew it as the ban, basically, and he said, that they were paranoid basically about football taking over, about soccer taking over, and so they banned anyone from going even watching it.
That's right.
And I remember apparently
The British sport, it was a British sport,
Oh, I
remember?
see, so it's
Yeah.
this mentality,
sport was
right?
soccer.
Okay,
Aye, absolutely.
okay, fair enough.
Garrison sport, and all that.
Right, gotcha.
Even the Irish president at the time, he went to see a game, the Irish national team, the Irish national soccer team, playing at Dalymount Park, and he was struck off by the GAA as one of the list of patrons. This is the president of the country. Because he's going to watch a cricket game.
They take it
So
seriously,
Sean,
innit?
he was in good company, Sean. But
Jeez, oh.
had that not happened, because it was the weekend, I think the weekend before, he'd starred against Kerry, he scored against the great goalkeeper, the great GAA goalkeeper at the time, Dan O'Keefe. And had they not banned him, you wonder if he would have kept on playing Gaelic and trying to split the two. Because I mean, that's the thing I thought when the book was, he was spreading himself too thinly and he wasn't really focusing on football. And if they hadn't banned him, you wondered if he would ever have focused on football, or if he would.
Exactly,
The
aye,
GAA was a
don't
big thing. I mean, he said himself, if he wanted to be a star in Ireland, GAA was the way to go.
Amazing aptitude for all these games.
Yeah,
Now, on this, sorry Peter, on the swimming angle, if I tick that one off, I'll tease the listeners, tell them there's a very grisly story in the book involving a dead body. I'm going to skip over that, but I'll pull Stephen in on Sean's swimming technique coming to the fore with Desmond White, and a story around saving a young boy on holiday.
Yeah, it's funny as well, because I mean, Sean, as you'll know from having read the book, didn't get on particularly well with Desmond White in later years.
Aye.
But they were away, and it was Celtic's first ever European trip in Valencia, and they were over there, and I think they were beside the swimming pool, which was obviously just beside the beach, and a Swiss tourist ran up screaming that his boy had been swept out to sea. So Sean, being the trained lifeguard, sprang into action and went out and swam out and saved this boy who'd been washed off his raft or whatever, so it was, but again, typical Sean, played it all down, and said, I did worse things in Sligo, and it wasn't a big deal, but he was made, back pages back home, and they were these heroes of this sea rescue drama, or whatever it's called. And, but no, it's just amazing. But again, and that was why I think it was important to have other people speaking and to drawing up, because see, if you had to start Sean about these things, it'd just be whole book saying, it wasn't a big sign, that wasn't a big deal,
Move on, let's talk about something else.
Exactly, aye.
You minded that? Saving somebody on a European trip. You minded that?
What?
Sean Fallon saving somebody.
That story, there you go, see. This boy was in the
I could have
Emirates.
been in the Middle East.
He was in the Middle East. No, but he was making a
You were in the
wedge.
Middle East. Where were you in the Middle East? You were in it 2 weeks.
55 I went to the Middle
That's
East.
why he can retire to
He was
Tenerife.
in the jail.
Oh!
55 I went to the Middle East.
Now, Peter, did I stop you in something there? Do you
Well,
want
I was going to say
sportsman?
about swimming. He won
Yes.
the Henry Cup twice.
There you go, yes.
Do you know any more about the Henry Cup?
Do you know, it's funny, when I was researching the book and when things were going out about it, there was a swimming club in Sligo actually contacted me asking for more information. They were looking into a small book themselves and on the history of swimming in Sligo, and they got in touch. And there was this, I think the Henry Cup came from some Sligo had emigrated to Australia and had donated this cup. And it was basically swimming out from near, Ross's Point, out at the Atlantic, in the Gareth Vogue into Sligo town itself. And it was a good few miles, and I think it was known as the Sligo Swim in later years. I think they renamed it. I don't know if I think the cup went missing. And Sean was a bit dubious. He thought there might have been some kind of family involvement in it going missing, because one of his brothers had won it as well.
Right.
So he was thinking that the family basically deserved it.
Oh, I know, that's a Conley thing.
But yeah, it was some. I mean, that again, Sean was very clever. Like he kind of knew the currents, and he swam all out
How you
and
bring that in,
basically,
so
yeah, exactly.
brilliant.
But when you see it, it's a powerful river, and I think at certain times of year. And then there was the great story about when he came back from being injured. I don't know if I'm skipping ahead here, but when he was the 53-54 season when Celtic won the double, when he'd been basically ruled out for the season, ended up coming back and pretty much inspiring Celtic to win the title in the Scottish Cup, scoring the goals. But he had gone back to Sligo to recuperate. He'd broken his arm, and he did loads of arm breaks.
Well,
and
I've
his
got a
arm was
broken
weak.
collarbone here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he
Now,
just had
come
so
on, the
many
injuries.
I
I've got
think there was a
cracking
bit in the
point
Daily
about that.
Record about that.
Is that right?
Sean Fallon. But it was Celtic star attacks Baskin shark.
Innocent basket shark. You'll have Gregor Kell on you. No, that was before his days. You'll be alright. You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
I knew the Daily Record had something up with that.
Oh, there you go. Right, I want these three boys to think about this. Your kind of memories of or favourite two-footed footballers, right? The guys with the class that could do it on either side. You have a wee think about that. I'm going to pull Stephen in on that point because there's kind of twofold to this. This is something that Sean reckons kind of pushed him on. He's kind of skill at football, and it also portrays his own character of kind of dedication and commitment to a task. How did he become so good at the 2 feet?
He was a nun.
A nun.
A nun taught him, yeah. She came out, and when he used to play in the playground, obviously, like all young boys do, and we went to a convent school, and so one of the nuns came out and taught him. He used to kick about, and he said she was a great player. He used to have a kick about with him and all the rest of the boys, but she said, look, you know, you've got talent, but you'll never do anything unless you practice with your left foot. And so he went away and took his right boot off for, you know, when he'd have kickabouts with his pal, played with just his left boot and a sock or a sand shoe in his right foot. And that was how he did it, and you know, but that was typical because he admitted himself he wasn't a great natural footballer. You know, he certainly wasn't.
I need to work at this.
Yeah, and that was it. Everything, he was very much self-made. You know, and he was full of admiration for the Tullys and the Jinkies. I mean, I was saying I think around early 2000s, he named his kind of favourite 10 Celts, and you had Jinky and you had Decanio.
Decanio, these kind of guys.
Tully, and you think, you know, like, so even Decanio, he wasn't there for long, but you know, I mean, I certainly loved Decanio when he was there, and that was the kind of player he loved. And he was saying he used to argue with Jock Stein about it at times because Jock Stein was no fan of Charlie Tully, really.
Exactly.
You know, his work rate and his training and things. And Sean was saying he could understand that, but he always, I think maybe because he was the kind of player he was, he appreciated guys who could do things he couldn't. And so he had a lot of time. And when I read in the book again, I'm probably skipping ahead, was that he really had to convince, or try to convince Jock Stein at first on Jinky.
Patience.
Yeah, absolutely. The patience aspect, which is the thing he said, the one thing he had over Jock. He admitted that Jock was superior on a lot of things, but he said that patience was one thing maybe he had a bit more abundant supplies of.
So boys, throw me some quick names. Guys that stuck out for you in the game.
Lubo
2-footed.
Marache.
Lubo, we'll go with that. Aye. One of your favourites, Brian?
Oh, without a doubt.
Aye. Skill just remarkable,
The
wasn't
only
it?
person I know could hit a corner with both feet the same way.
Aye. Fantastic. Now, childhood love for Celtic. This is kind of building up the stuff he knew about the club and felt about the club before he's even there. For you guys, would it be fair to say family, fatherhood figure, that kind of stuff, aye? Yourself, Mr Sanderson, was it the same kind of things? Is it a family
Next door
thing?
neighbour.
Next door neighbour? Ah, right, okay.
Martin Valentine.
Just telling you the
He's
stories.
the first man to
and-
take me to Parkhead.
Ah, right, okay. Then brought you into it that way.
No,
You started
they
to
just
see
showed
the
me and
games.
that was me, I was in it.
You were gone.
Well, I was very lucky. I think I told you that story before. When I went to the game, I was young.
You were never young.
And, well, I was at this time. Once. And Celtic won 5-1. And I think they were playing Wraith Rovers or East Fife. One of the two, I'm not sure. Right. It's quite a bit back.
John Daly's
And I always wondered, if they'd won 5-1,
I told you.
they'd been a Wraith Rovers or an East Fife supporter.
Yeah.
So that's how I became a Celtic supporter.
Oh,
because Celtic won
that's a thin
5-1.
line, I'll tell you. And Stephen, for Sean, his father, the Sligo connection, brother Wolfen, he had all of this before he went there, didn't he?
I mean,
The whole
yeah,
thing going to Glasgow and stuff, and the fairy tale of the club, if you like.
The bit I read tonight, is this true, Stephen, that it's just when you talk about saving a life, it's always like Jimmy
Oh,
McManamy's.
brilliant, that's the other part of it, yep. This is a fairy tale.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that true?
That was the part I knew. I mean, yeah, Jimmy McManamy's son saved Sean's sister from drowning. Little girl.
Lily from drowning, aye.
Amazing. And I mean, Sean really felt that there was something, you know, in the heavens,
Something in the
whatever, you know,
stars,
pushing him towards Celtic, because he said that, you know, I mean, I knew the part about Jimmy McManamy. I'd read that somewhere, and I knew it already before I started. The part about his father, and as you know, we dedicate almost the first chapter to his father. Who I just thought it was a fascinating story, and people. I remember the publishers when they first read the book, and Hugh McDonald was reading over it, and he said, "Look, see if you'd showed me the chapter list before, you know, I'd started reading the book." He said, "I would have said, no, you're spending too long in Sligo, and you're spending too long pre-Celtic." But he said, "I just loved the story so much. I'm so glad you did that." You know, and I think if we'd done it just Sean Fallon the Celtic years, it wouldn't have been the same story about a man, and you know,
there's a foundation there, I think,
definitely.
in the early part. You know, his character, the way he views things in the game. There's loads of stuff we'll come on here about how he thinks about himself and other players, and so, and it all comes from that. And it really does.
I think I tried to make it all the way through. If it was really interesting and it was really, and it built him as a character, then include it. You know, and that was why, again, people might be surprised that Lisbon gets barely a chapter.
Aye.
But I thought, well, so much has been done in Lisbon, unless you're going to add something to it, you know,
Yes.
don't spend chapters and chapters unless you've got something fresh to bring to it, you know, that way, because everyone's read about Lisbon and they know,
Yep.
not to diminish it, but unless Sean's got something fresh to bring, or unless I can, you know, a different perspective, then don't dwell on these things. But the McMenemy thing I knew, and I thought it was amazing, and that's a kind of fairy tale in itself, this
That's
Celtic
just pure
legend's son.
Celtic.
But then his father, the fact his father, you know, and Sean having never seen his father goes over injured in the war, ends up in Glasgow, watches this Celtic team for a while, Patsy Gallagher and all that, comes home just raving about Celtic, forms Sligo Celtic, and just, you know, tells Sean all these stories about Celtic growing up. I just thought that was really a romantic part of the story as well, and the fact that Sean, long before he's seen Celtic, I think he never made it out of Ireland before he was 28, so long before he'd ever seen Celtic, he just loved Celtic.
Aye.
Just because of all that, because of the McMenemy connection, because of his father.
Yeah.
And see, you'll notice that as well, all the kind of little landmarks, the 54 Cup final, you know,
Yes.
like when he first wins, it's always, and I was so pleased with my father. I felt
Aye.
everything. I knew how proud my father would be, and
Yep.
that's what meant so much to him. You know, everything was. I knew my dad would be watching, and you know,
Exactly.
I love this quote.
Peter.
Sorry, Richard. I love this quote. He said, "I would have signed for Celtic for nothing. You can't buy a dream."
There you
I
go.
love that quote.
yeah.
He
almost did, I mean-
fantastic. Well, aye, that's something. Talk about the biscuit tin
Yeah.
mentality. It was alive and well back then.
I've got it there.
Incredible.
Come on.
Incredible.
Now, I can explain the arithmetic around that, but let me build that up for your listeners. We've got, going back to his dad, clever man, told him, get a second trade.
Yeah.
Get a background, something you can fall on, and if this doesn't happen, don't worry about it. And two things, Sean took that and gave that same lesson to all the young guys he took on, and, you know, kind of bred that into their thoughts. But that second trade, can you guess what it is? The Iron Man, the hard man, the rugged defender, the, you know, physical boy, the boy that never shirks a challenge. His second job, no?
Baker.
A baker, a confectioner,
Yeah.
decorates cakes,
Yeah.
and very well.
He was
I
really
mean,
proud of it.
aye.
He'd always, you know, Myra would laugh because he was boast about it. And even one of his pals, Laurie Innes, who was an old Clyde player, used to say that every Christmas, that even he would keep up when he was Celtic assistant manager. He said every Christmas Sean would bake me a cake, and I'd give him a bottle of whiskey in return. He'd bake me a cake. I don't know how that works, and Sean's a teetotaler, but he'd get a bottle of whiskey in return for baking this fantastic cake and decorating it and everything. And as you say, you can hardly imagine it. And there's a photo when I was digging through the old scraps, and Sean's father had kept a scrapbook as well of him that had been passed on. And there was a photo of Sean baking a cake for his landlady, you know, in the 1950s. This was in the press in Scotland, and it's amazing, you know. But he was really, really proud of that kind of side of his. He's saying, all artistic stuff, son, you know.
Aye.
All very artistic, you know. He was really, yeah.
Yep.
So there you go. Wasn't an artist as a player, but as a confectioner.
Excellent.
His rock cakes would be good.
He's rock. Oh, dear man. Oh, spoiler. Right, listeners, I'm keeping an eye on the clock, and I know these boys will chat here, there, and everywhere, so I'm going to jump over loads of great stuff about from Sligo to Glenavon. Is it Glenavon or Glenavon? How do they pronounce it?
Say Glenavon.
Glenavon.
Yeah.
Aye, right. Loads of great insights in there about how it's actually hard for him in the start, because obviously coming from the
call
south.
it Glenavon.
Ah, there you go. Well, that call's got a wee bit of an impact there on how people felt about it at the time. You know, there's some nice insights there, but how Sean himself kind of just didn't take anything to do with that, got on well with everybody, and had a fantastic start as well. But that's a teaser for you. I'm also going to skip over the international fixture where he was selected, even though he was playing in the north, and being a man from the south, he was selected for what way around is it? We've got the League of Ireland versus the Irish League.
Yeah, the Irish League's the north and the League
Irish
of Ireland's the south, and
There you go.
he was selected to play for the Irish League, and
Yep.
he was proud, and again it caused a little bit of controversy. I think it was the first. I think he said it was the first or the last to be selected for the Irish League from the south. But he said he felt proud to be, you know, and I think it put him in the shop window a little bit, because that was where Jimmy McGrory came to see him, and then was in one of these interleague fixtures, and they were a big deal. They were played, you know, sellout crowds at, you know, Dalymount and Windsor Park, so it was a big deal for him to be selected. And he, you know yourself, he had a very kind of uncomplicated attitude towards it. He felt, well, if I'd been asked, and at that point it was very common. You had all the Johnny Careys and
They were
all these guys
all
that
over
were
the island,
representing both sides. So it was a bit of a mess. It was only sorted out partly through Sean, as you'll know from having
Exactly, yeah. You see those FIFA boys getting involved again. I don't like to cast up to you.
they sorted it all out. You know?
Brilliant. You hear that one, Seth?
Sam at signed half.
Now, let's jump on to his signing for Celtic then. So, we've touched on it a wee bit there. This man of honour and integrity and character, and he lied.
Yeah.
He lied to Jimmy McGrory, his idol. Why did he do that?
He was worried they wouldn't sign him again. He thought he'd left it too late, because he'd left it until, he was pushing 28, and he felt that, Celtic might think, we've got to pay Glenavon $5,000 for this guy. Is he too old? Because Celtic, as it went on, Celtic tend to go for younger players, and even the Irish guys they brought over, the Tillys and the Peacocks were much younger than Sean when they came over. So he was a bit worried, and I think unnecessarily worried. Reading between the lines, it seemed that Jimmy McGrory was really sold on him. But he told him, he thought, hey, I'll just tell them. He said, everyone did it this time, so everyone, at this point, everyone lied about their age. But he told him he was 22. Didn't go by halves. You think he would knock a couple orders off a couple of years.
That's no you, Brian. Just chop him off for a couple of months or so. You know what I mean? And it became quite a kind of KGB secret around the club. But he eventually found out with the passports.
That's right. I mean, he said that he used to always get stopped wherever Celtic would go, and Celtic seemed to take him on some fantastic trips around this time, away to months for the US and to Rome for a couple of months to meet the Pope and all these kind of things, and bumping out with Bing Crosby and all. And he said that whenever he went, and this continued, he would get trouble because he had an Irish passport, and I think the club said, you need to get a British passport. And so I think he had to come clean then, and as they were going along. But he said Jimmy McGrory was absolutely brilliant about it, and he said he didn't feel too bad because he felt that he was as fit as a young man that age, and it's proved the case. I mean, he's 8 years of service, so he certainly gave him it, but he never caught on, and Jimmy McGrory never, you still had reports when he was getting appointed as a coach, later in the decade, and he was 36, and it says, the 30-year-old Fallon and everything, So just for years, and he said, what amazed me was that when I spoke to Jock Steen's son, and which was great. It was great he did it because he's never spoken apart of you. He said that he's always kind of steered clear of the press because he's not like some of the things that have been written about his father and everything. And he was saying that his dad didn't know. He said his dad and Sean would always tease each other, that about who was the older. And he said that his dad wasn't even sure for a long time. He said Sean would always say he was younger, and ended up it was Sean that was older by a few months.
Brilliant. And that move, as we say, that cost him money because with the two jobs he spoke about, playing for Glenavon and the confectioner's job, even negotiating a higher price with Celtic, even pushing his luck, he still ended up getting less, even back then.
Considerably less as well. I mean, it was about, I think it was about 75% or something.
About £14 he was in at Glenavon part time. And he got 10 quid when he started singing for Celtic.
Incredible, isn't it? I mean,
crazy.
Because even I think the baker's wage.
Money then.
A lot of money there.
Sure, aye. Still all relative, but when you compare it to what he's getting.
Well, when you think about it, the baker's wage, I think the confectioner's wage was equivalent to what was being offered by Celtic. So, and the Glenavon wage topped that up. So he was. Basically, and he was sending this money back to Sligo to his family and everything, So he said he felt, but he eventually, I think it was £8 he was going to offer at first, and then eventually got them up to 10. But it is amazing, and I read, whatever my father and other working class heroes, how things changed, how they generally were. Footballers generally were pretty much working class. Guys that could work in a factory or in overtime could earn as much as a lot of footballers for Celtic in those days. But after the minimum wage was abolished, or whatever, the maximum wage, in the early 60s, that's when it all changed, and that was when the kind of steady incline, and I think the 60s was gradual, and then the 70s it really picked up, and then obviously now it's a different world.
What was the Lisbon Lions getting before they actually won the cup?
Well,
they weren't getting a great deal more.
No, I remember hearing it was because there was a bit of a dispute about it, because Billy McNeil they found out that Tommy Gemmell found out that Billy McNeil was getting paid a 10 or more. Yeah, so it was 40 quid for the rest of them, and Billy McNeil was getting 50. And that was a bit of a source of dispute, and they said that was where a lot of the wee niggly problems started. Just a bit of disunity started to creep in, because I think Tommy Gemmell found this out through going out with Jock Steen's secretary, that Billy McNeil as captain was being paid £10 more, and they felt this was unfair, especially the players they had at that time. But Celtic's policy was, I think the basic wage was still pretty low for quite a long time, and they topped up the bonuses. But as David Hay and things, they rebelled against it, because if you're out injured, you didn't get the bonuses, obviously, and it wasn't your fault that you were injured. If you played in a way that David Hay kind of did, putting your heart and soul into everything, you picked up an injury. So that was how a lot of the disputes started, because the basic wage was still really, really low.
So it was only 3 shillings to get in.
Yeah.
Was it for the matches?
That's what it was, 3 bob to get in.
Jeez, that's something that's changed as well. Much as I carry it.
Much was a carry.
That's the much you get left out of the night. At the gate.
Talking of carry it, nice wee segue, Brian. Thank you, sir. Signing for Celtic. Why would Sean Fallon come to hate the sight and taste of lemonade?
Charlie was all Charlie Tully's fault.
Charlie Tully, so talk to us.
Well,
What happened?
they had Charlie Tully kind of as the chaperone bringing him over, which was a bit of a strange decision when you think about it. But Charlie Tully met him on the boat, and I think it was a decent, duration of the sail in those days. And he was accompanying him over, and he said the first thing he said, "Well, Sean, let's go down to the bar," and. He said, what are you having? He said, just a lemonade, Charlie. He said, you're not one of those, are you? And he said that just to keep pace with Charlie Tully, I think he'd some like 14, 15 lemonades, and he said it's a really rough crossing.
Aye.
He was really sick. He said you can have a look at lemonade after that.
Brilliant.
But he loved Charlie Tully, and it's funny after he passed away, people in touch from the Belfast Celtic folk, and because Charlie Tully Jr. is involved there, and he was saying how really sad he was, because although they were really different characters, and they really did get on well, and I think they always had a good bit of banter, because Tully wasn't the worst trainer at the club, and I think Sean was about the best, but Charlie would always say, I won't make you a better player, Sean, don't want to run all you want.
That nonsense. Yeah. Now, there you go, a wee tidbit, listeners, and just to tell you, for that one wee bit, there's about 10. This is how this works. Honestly, there's wee nuggets just everywhere through this.
I can tell you what, for every 10 there was another 20 I left out. I mean, that's the thing,
I bet the editing was just a nightmare.
There's so many.
And that's the big get this. Yeah. So, injuries, as I say, I've got a wee pop quiz later on, but let's jump into one of the biggest kind of problems for him at the time was ankle injury. Yeah. Now, of course, when you get that, it was flaring up and down. It happened when, he was in a coaching session and another opposition player fell on top of him, and it would go away, it would come back, cause him nightmares, and he eventually got it sorted. So, hyperbaric chambers, physios in Sweden, what are we talking? How did they get that?
This is just another amazing Sean Fallon story. He went to Lochderg, as you'll know. Came back from basically being told that his career was in real danger. This was just after he signed for Celtic, and he played about 3 games, and he'd had a nightmare start. He scored an own goal in his debut, wasn't playing well, came back, thought he'd got over it. Alec Dowdall's the kind of physio trainer guy at the time. He worked really hard on him, but it kept on flaring up, and this had been bothering him for years, and he thought his career was going to be over. So he went to Lochderg and prayed for 3 days, fasted, didn't eat a thing, prayed, came back, and it was fine.
That was it.
Never gave him a trouble again for the rest of his career. This injury had been bothering him for years, and the doctors said they couldn't fix.
Aye.
So
now, Brian, I'm thinking gout here. I'm thinking, this could be it.
But he can't fast for 3 days.
Aye, he can't fast for 3 days. You're not as devout as Sean was.
Oh, he's amazing. No wonder he was a man of faith till the end,
Well, see, there you go. And was that a strong part of his character?
Definitely, yeah. He really was. I mean, as you know from the early chapters, his family all thought he was going to be a priest.
Yes.
It was really. They said he was a very. It was a private faith, I suppose. He wasn't.
No, it's not an in-your-face thing.
Yeah.
Aye.
But he was very much. As you know, again, he hated all the Catholic Protestant stuff, either at Glenavon or later when he moved here. He hated it all. But he was his faith was really very important to him, and his family all said that as well, and he credited that. He said it gave him a real peace, and he prayed every night, even when he was very old and his knees didn't stand up very well kneeling down. Aye. I think he made sure he did it every night, and definitely a big part of his life.
Aye, okay. Right, I've jumped about 10 points here just to keep us on track here. I'm going to jump forward to Scottish Cup 1951. 131,943 in the crowd. That's just balmy. Yeah. Is that the kind of things you were used to, Mr. Estos? Seriously, I mean, you can't even comprehend that figure these days.
Well, even at Parkhead, you were getting 90,000.
Aye.
Something like that, Rangers and that was stunning, so you can imagine the wee park it was, and you were crushed. Your legs were always hot.
Right. And we're talking at a time when the team was bad. When the team was struggling. Oh, God. I think you were talking about the body heat there. Oh, dearie me. Okay. Touching on that, I've got the phrase, an amazing sense of relief. not that kind of relief, but around the club, Sean himself at the time, Celtic status at that time, just a whole relief for the club, and a kind of hope for the future at that point.
Yeah, I mean anyway, younger fans reading it will find it maybe hard to believe, but Celtic a couple of years before had been come so close to getting relegated. I mean, the closest final day of the season, needing to win pretty much, going up to Dundee, and that was the club that Sean came into, and they had a real scare, and that was, they brought in Tully around that time, and they tried to kind of get it back up. But Celtic were a mid-table team really around that period, and it was so things like the Scottish Cup. Motherwell were probably favourites for that game.
Aye.
Celtic came into it, and a great early goal by John McPhail, and then pretty much held on, I think, for most of the rest of the game.
And touching on that, how a young fan today would be like, what are you talking about relegation? The other thing I suppose about that as well that pops out is, for Sean himself, treated like a hero, went home to Sligo. His paper would describe him as the quote as one of the top ranked defenders in the Scottish game in his first season. And saying that about Scottish football, which young fans today won't realise, that's a big thing, isn't it? Because Scottish football was up there. It was really well thought of.
Absolutely, yeah.
So for him to do that and achieve that in his first season,
it was known as. For a long time, Scottish football had just a fantastic reputation, and there were so many great clubs. When you look back to the 50s and the spread of trophies, things like East Fife and it, going up, and Hearts and Kilmarnock and Hibs were a great side, the famous five and all that, and the spread of trophies during that decade was probably, I'm sure fans of non-Glasgow clubs would say that it was a golden age for Scottish football, because it was such an even spread. Rangers became dominant, I suppose, as the decade wore on and into the early 60s, but in the early part it was a real good spread.
Right. And Sean himself, one of his kind of nice wee phrases, as I walked off Hampden Park, I felt I had got everything out of life I had always wanted. Yeah,
and there was, you will know yourself, there's so many badge kissers in football and so many people who talk the talk, but I've never met anyone that loved Celtic more than Sean Fallon, and it was all so genuine, and not as well. It was a love that was put to the test because of the way he was treated in the end. And I've seen other people who, no doubt grew up real Celtic fans but have become bitter with Celtic because of maybe the way they were treated or certain things about. And he was never an ounce of bitterness in him.
Yeah.
And it was such a genuine, just an uplifting love for Celtic as well. Every time you went up to see him, it just reminded you of what you loved about Celtic as well.
That's right, touches on that core element,
absolutely,
and that comes through so much. Just a wee throwaway line he has. Aye, that's right. It's like another fan. Forget his history and his amazing achievements. It's just another Celtic fan.
Absolutely,
to the core. Right, I'm keeping on the pace here. Skip my head as well. Political football. There's a chapter called Political Football, and one of Sean's phrases for this: most unpleasant experience of his career. So not his life, we've got another thing to touch on, but this is his career. Now, this starts off nice because it gets a nice wee letter through the post saying you've been selected for the Ireland versus England game. Now, how's that going to be a bad thing?
It was Northern Ireland. That's because this was long before they decided that what the team should be called. It was Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland, and again, the good guys at FIFA sorted that out. But Sean had been called up, and as I say, at that point, you'd players playing for both sides. You'd lots of all the greats, the Careys and all the real excellent Irish players, and the Northern Ireland were by far the more established team and the better team at that point, and they were playing in the home internationals, which were the big games. They were playing against that English team, which is Stanley Matthews and all these great players in Scotland, and as well, it obviously had Bertie Peacock and Charlie Tully, and so Sean gets this call up, and he thinks, well, these other guys from the south are playing them. My best pal Bertie Peacock, my pal Charlie Tully's there, so of course I'm going to play. And he said they'd shown a lot of faith in him, the guys from the north, and the guys from the IFA had shown a lot of faith in him when the guys from the FI were a bit sniffy. They'd had chances to call him up for the league games, and they never had.
He only got 8 caps.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's so he was more than happy to play, but it caused a bit of a problem because at that point there was a lot of wrangling going on over this who could be calling themselves Ireland, basically. And
as political as the word, isn't
absolutely.
It?
And they felt that they'd kind of drawn a line in the sand before, but they'd forgotten about Sean. Basically, the South had asked all the Irish players to kind of nail their colours to the mast and say, right, we're not going to represent the North anymore. We'll just play for the South. But because Sean hadn't been capped, he wasn't included in this. But the South hadn't called him at that point, so he was called, and he said, of course I'll play a chance to play against Stanley Matthews, and he'd been probably in direct opposition to him, and great chance for his career and to play alongside his pals. But things started to kick in, and as you say, it became very political. And
there seems to be two parts to this. There's the politics, the associations, people get involved at mayor level as well, his father, and all sorts of dodgy politics stuff. But there's a real physical thing going on as well. There's physical threats against his house and his family, and Neil Lennon popped into my head when I was reading this chapter.
Absolutely, it was one of these things I remember reading when I was going through the old clippings, and it was a piece, and I think I don't know how the Belfast Telegraph got wind of it, but they'd covered it around the time of the Neil Lennon thing. Basically, Sean saying, "I've been there, Neil," and as you say, there was a threat they were going to burn his house down and go after his family back in Sligo. Not in Glasgow, back in Sligo, and they were going to cause trouble for his father. He was involved in politics, and then basically. I make things difficult for him. And Sean felt being isolated from all. He said, if I'd been back in Sligo, it might have been different. He said, but you can't just kind of be in a different country and just leave them to fend for themselves. So he felt he had no option but to pull out. But he felt really bad about it. And it's funny, I mean, the one thing, one of the Irish papers used a kind of clip of this last week, and they left it out, and it was made like he was torn between the north and the south, like he was almost wanting to choose the north, which was never the case. I mean, he said, look, I was an Irishman. He said, I wanted to play for my country. He said, I was born in the south, of course I want. But he said at that time you could do both, so it wasn't like he was wanting to choose playing for Northern Ireland. He just said, I wanted to do both, because he said all the great players in that day could choose both, and he said I didn't see why I couldn't do the same. So but it was really hurt him, and I think it's a shame you would have, because he loved playing for Ireland, but as you say, it was only 8 times he played for them, and even then he found the FAI, I think, pretty difficult to deal with and not altogether pleasant.
Now, there's a very important France game that I'm going to skip over, listener. Another tease for you, get into that. Some great anecdotes around there and his involvement in that, because France at the time were really at the peak, if you like. So I'll leave that just hanging in the breeze. But let's jump at another wee story. These two characters have dragged me around some racecourses in times, and they've took me into some dodgy situations. But for Sean, him and Bertie Peacock had a bit of a time of it at a racecourse. Going back to Ireland, toast to the town, everything's dead easy. But they came close to a big problem.
They did. They met Eamon de Valera, of course, and he was chanting about Celtic, all sorts, and they said, a very nice man. But he said he got called away by his entourage, to meet and greet some people, and he said, de Valera said to him, would you mind looking after your young grandson with him? Would you mind looking after my young grandson while I'm away? And he said, no problem, of course. He said they turned their back and the grandson was gone. And he said it was just this young boy. And he said that racecourse was absolutely packed. And he said they couldn't find him anywhere. And de Valera was still away, so him and Bertie Peacock were racing around this racecourse trying to find this young
lad.
This
is the Irish T-shirt.
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
He honestly thought he was going to jail. Which is what I've thought a few times with these characters, to be honest.
So he said he'd never been so relieved when he found him.
So some cracking wee stories like that.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, 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 tock.
Now, let me jump onto some characters. If you talk about Sean Fallon, the obvious is to say Jock Stein, right, big characters in life. But let me touch quickly on 3 other characters. First up, Jimmy McGrory, right? The man who signed him, obviously, an idol for Sean himself. Is this fair that what I got was a split character? He was the golden legend as a player, but he was this frustrating failure as a manager. Is that fair? And Sean kind of felt torn between those two realities, is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sean was always really... It pained him to criticise him, and I don't think he ever would have used the word failure, to be honest, because he had so much affection for him, personal affection and affection for his status as such a Celtic legend.
Exactly.
And he felt... Sean's frustration more was he felt that he could have been a good manager almost if he'd just been a different personality. He felt that he told a story about how one time, I think everyone knows that Jimmy McGrory didn't do training and didn't do tactic talk, didn't do team talks or anything. But he said one time they were out in the training ground and McGrory came out and he said someone crossed the ball over. And he said this was McGrory as a manager, probably in his 50s. He said he went up and just bulleted his header into the net. He said it was just a thing of beauty. And he said, I was playing they moved Sean up front at this point, and he said he was a fish out of water, and he said he just wished you could come out and teach me kind of how to do that almost. He said, but he just never did. He said he could have been he'd been one of the all-time greats. All that knowledge, exactly. Wisdom, he just felt it had gone to waste. But it was maybe just his personality. And the thing, sometimes I think when you read through and because you poured over every Celtic book out there, you kind of see these situations in isolation. You think, well, why did Jimmy? It must have been obvious Jimmy McGrory should have done more. But that was the way managers were in those days. It wasn't like he was, in isolation. And that was the Rangers manager was the same. They were, they came along with their hat, they smoked their cigars, and they kind of, they
just
their pipes, and they just
known to be that.
Yeah, they weren't coaches. It was Jock Stein really, Bill Shankly and Busby really revolutionised the whole idea of what a manager should be. And before then, that Jimmy McGrory was the norm. It wasn't like he was.
I think Jimmy McGrory had a big problem with Bob Kelly. Did you know? Bob Kelly was kind of an overbearing player.
Everybody had a big problem with him.
Well, I mean, that was...
Well, number 2 is Bob Kelly. Let me throw you in there, take Peter's point here and throw you in. Again, this seemed to be split because, on the one hand, you could paint him as the stubborn, principled man, but the power in that was that he was the guy who was able to stand up to the SFA about the flag from that rock position. But you can throw it the other way and say, well, aye, that's true, but that same stubbornness then led him to try everything, try and do everything, try and control everything. And, is that fair as well?
Definitely. Funny enough, he was one of the ones that was a chapter I really cut back in the end, because I had a look over it, and I found Bob Kelly a really fascinating character. And he was someone that I'd come into thinking, Bob Kelly was a guy that interfered in team selection, and the Kelly kids, and he was responsible for a lot of these things. But it was much more complex than that, and there was a lot. He did so much good on and off the park for Celtic, and things I hadn't quite appreciated about him, and just his whole background, the fact that he'd been in a tram accident that had caused him to have a withered arm, and apparently he'd been quite a good footballer until that point, and he'd still kept on going with this bad arm, and until his father had said to him, you shouldn't do this, but it's not fair on your opponents. His father was obviously very much involved at Celtic, the first Celtic captain, and he said it's not fair on your opponents, you need to just give up football altogether. And he'd had dreams of playing for Celtic, Robert Kelly.
Sure.
And so from having dreams, they were just crushed. And I think Sean said he always thought he was a frustrated footballer, that he wanted to be a Celtic player, couldn't do it because of his physical disability, and so that was how he decided he was going to influence the club, and he was going to. And he said everything was done for the right reasons. Again, it was like similar to Jimmy McGrory. He had a lot of personal affection for Bob Kelly, and I know you'll get guys from that era, and I don't know what your own view is of Bob Kelly, but who just had nothing good to say about Bob Kelly. Really nothing good to say about him at all. And he said everything that he did was for the right reasons and with the right motives.
Right.
But he said he wasn't always right. Basically, the motives weren't always backed up, and he had these romantic notions, and the Kelly kids was a perfect example.
Yes.
He thought, must be babes, what a great idea. Let's do the same thing at Celtic. Let's get rid of all the old players, the Bobby Collinses, the guys that the McPhail was retired, Neely Mawkins, phase out, Bertie Peacock, and let's just have a team of young boys. But they were just... You can imagine what it would be like to have a team of young boys at Celtic even these days. The fans are so demanding, and they wilted beneath that, and they were playing against a really tough, a really good Rangers team at the time, and it was just a horrible time. But it was for the best of motives, but it was naive, I suppose, is the best way to say it. But he was just a stronger character than McGrory, and that was what came through. And it seemed that after the near relegation, that Jimmy McGrory started to doubt himself and started to kind of almost let Bob Kelly in and stand aside and just accept the fact that his role was to just be there as almost a symbolic figure.
Yep. Now the third figure, very limited time with the club, but still someone whose kind of greatness, character, skill impacted Sean, Jimmy Hogan.
Yeah.
If there's listeners of younger ages listening in, Mr Sanderson, how would you start trying to explain who Jimmy Hogan was in the world of football? Would you know? Or Stephen, is there an easy way to show a young fan of today what a Jimmy Hogan was and what he meant to football?
I suppose the game that everyone knows is England-Hungary. That Hungary beating England at Wembley, trouncing them, and when England thought they were the kings of the world, and Hungary just went and absolutely destroyed them, humiliated them, and that was Jimmy Hogan. And before travel was quite common for footballers and coaches.
Yep.
He'd been all around Europe as this kind of football missionary, but I'd gone with he was decades ahead of his time, really.
Exactly.
And he came to Celtic, having been in Austria and Switzerland and built, and Hungary obviously, and kind of laid the foundations for their football.
It just transformed them, didn't
Absolutely,
it?
yeah.
Young fans just won't know it. It just completely transformed
Even
entire
Germany,
countries.
yourself.
And
Germany.
all these countries look back on him as a legend, don't they? I mean, it's phenomenal. But when he was in Scotland...
Yeah, he was an English guy, and he always wanted the England job. I think he was from Lancashire, but he was a real devout Catholic and he had a real affinity with Celtic, and he was thrilled to get a job. He was already quite old when he came over here, but he lived into his late 80s, and he went for a long time after. But the Celtic players, it was a real... they didn't cover themselves in glory with their response to him, because this was this guy teaching them things that... The kind of things that Jock Stein never came into contact with him. The kind of things that Stein would be doing,
Exactly.
a decade and a half later,
Uh-huh.
and he was trying to teach them that, possession football, trying to, play the right way, goalkeeper using it from the back, not just hitting it long, and all these things that were really so far ahead of their time. Cut the grass with the ball and all this kind of
That's
thing.
right, yep.
But the players wouldn't have it. They thought, who's this old guy, and they couldn't be taught. And it was such a wasted opportunity. And Sean only dealt with him because of his injury. They went back to Lochberg. He only dealt with him for a couple of months, and he said he was really disappointed about that, because he felt... And after then, they didn't really have a coach at all. It was the physio, Ali Dowdings, that took training. Yep. And so they went from having this...
the park.
Yeah, they went from having this brilliant coach. People say he was one of the defining coaches of the that era, and they basically kind of mistreated him and let him go to waste, and ended up with nobody, and that was a big part. And as you know as well, there was the chance that around the same time to have Matt Busby at Celtic.
Busby, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
When you think how incredible the Celtic story is, but if you add in these characters,
the what ifs are incredible, aren't they?
Man.
And you wonder how different the 50s would have turned out. Because
exactly.
You look at that team in the 50s and you line off the players who were in it, and there's so many Celtic legends, like great players, but they didn't amount to anything really. A couple of cups and one league, and that was it.
Oh God! You did have me daydreaming at that point. Actually, with these characters, it could have been what ifs, as you say. Right, I'm skipping through loads of other parts, listeners. You need to read it to find out about Sean becoming captain, different games that he had, how he looked back on that with loads and loads of pride. There was a cracking wee bit of wall pick out, 5-0 against Dundee, and then the next game 3-2 against Falkirk, and he breaks his arm. And it's in a challenge with Jimmy Delaney, accidentally, but a powerful challenge. The doctor, when he says, I think I broke my arm, the doctor holds his arm up to his ear, shakes it, and listens for something rattling, and says, "Nah, you're all right." And he played the rest of the game.
Well, the bit I've got something similar here. I've got one where is it? In October of that season, that was a 1954 season, I think it was.
Right.
Against Hearts, he broke his collarbone. It was the days before there was a substitute allowed the pitch. So he went off for 20 minutes, only to return with his arm in a sling and continued playing.
It's mad.
The guys
we're going to jump at the pop quiz for you here, right? Injuries. So apart from the bumps and scrapes, what can you remember for writing the book? What did Sean have? Go for it, and I'll tick them off. So what have you had there, Peter? That was broken collarbone, right? Tick.
Yeah, about 4 arm breaks. I mean,
5 breaks in the left arm. There you go. Right.
Ligament damage in his knee.
Yep. Both legs. Yep.
Ankles.
Fractured ankle.
Yeah. The flake fracture. That's right. Yeah. The eye injury that he had.
Eye injury.
Him.
Yep.
Yeah. So we got.
Two more you can get.
You mentioned
there's one in the face, one in the body.
Ribs.
Broken nose.
Cracked ribs, broken nose. Well done, Mr Sanderson.
Right, yeah.
Now,
because the eye and the nose were the same incident, obviously.
Exactly, aye. And he never failed to complete a match. As Peter was saying, came back on. He just refused to go off. Just wasn't that kind of guy.
I noticed actually we put out a wee extract about the Hearts game, about how he completed it, and someone replied, Adam Matthews, come on, get a hold of yourself,
get a grip of yourself, pal.
Going off a broken collarbone.
If you'd seen that. Now on that, this was beautiful. I'll need to throw this one in for the listeners just to kind of whet their appetite. Packy Bonner talking about the nearly losing an eye incident. Packy Bonner remembers a story of Sean always telling him about the eye, and one day it was bugging him, and so he starts in the story and he says, "It happened against Dundee, son, and it was all Jock Stein's fault. He should have been marking the big striker who was about to head the ball into the net. I couldn't get to the ball in time, and the only option was to stick my face in the back of his head. Well, son, I woke up, I didn't know where I was, my nose was broken, my teeth were missing, and this eye has never been the same since. But I'll tell you something, son, Dundee didn't score." that is just class, absolutely class. And that, you know, that kind of the character of him and how he feels about the game and stuff, it just always seems to come out. You know, he talks so much. Even at that time, this surprised me. He mentions that players were acting it.
Yeah.
In that era, and it really rankled with him. I thought it was a kind of modern day, you know.
I mean, I think Sean's standards were pretty high. So whether you know whether his, I don't think he'd be diving the way he was today, but he probably felt if it wasn't an absolute scything challenge, he'd no right to go down. But no, I think he was ridiculously brave, you know, and to his own physical detriment. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he caused himself so much damage, but some of the stories were just fantastic, you know, that one, and again probably jumping into Sammy Baird and all these kind of things.
Yes,
just
go on that one.
Crazy.
I mean, in his words, again, let's pick out some of his words. It's a man's game and you should act like a man. Showing an opponent that you're hurt is a weakness as far as I'm concerned, and that's why I always played on. Big problem in today's game, Peter? Biggest problem? Do we overplay it? Is it, you know, diving and cheats and kidding on? Is it not that bad? Or are you one of those guys that's torn between, you know what, if it's Celtic in the League Cup final and we could get a penalty?
Well, exactly. Me and Jim are actually talking about, I don't know if you've seen much of the weekend, the guy from Norwich putting the ball in the net.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We were talking about that earlier on. I said, I've done the same, I'd have put the ball in the net. I would have.
Yeah. Now, Brian, would you take the Puritan angle, or would you go with your brother on that one? Oh, well, you know, if it's going to get us a goal, you know, I could kind of turn an eye.
I don't know. Modern football now it's destroyed now. You've got people's highly paid, Richard, and the way they've got to play football now is to get an advantage. The only way they'll get an advantage is to bend the rules.
It's been doing that.
You can always say folk are cheating, but it's they bend the rules to the max, and it's up to the officials to pick up it.
Is that fair with the pace of the game, but?
Well, the pace of the game, but the refereeing has not moved on.
Sure.
With TV advantage.
Because of these FIFA guys.
Well, I don't know what to say.
You can play that game, pal.
If you watch them now, there was an incident on Saturday with Liverpool. As far as he's running in, and the boy puts two fingers in his shirt and gives it a tweak, and down he goes.
Yes.
Years ago, at Tannadice, John Hughes got the ball, and the boy grabbed him with two horns in the back.
Right.
And it was quite muddy, you know, it was wintry.
Right.
And the boy went through like a skier. Big John didn't stop, and the boy went with him. The boy went, that's the God's honest truth, the boy went with him.
See.
And yet, a wee tweak like that, you thought they'd been shot.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen if you play Juventus.
No, allegedly.
I think there's always a balance to be struck, isn't it? And you want to get away from a stage where, you know, I think abolishing the old tackle from behind was a great thing, because you know, you're protecting the guys who people want to see, you know, and who are just, you know, again the idea, let's hit them early on and hobble them for the rest of the game. And the players.
I don't think diving's as bad as it was 5-6 years ago.
Do you know?
I don't. I think TV's caught up with it.
You think that's what it is? Right, okay.
If somebody dies, it's on the TV.
Right.
Look, I think there was a guy died last week. Was it Bayern Munich? No, it wasn't Bayern Munich. Somebody playing Real Madrid. Whoever playing Real Madrid.
Right.
A Juventus guy actually went out of the box and he fell out his feet.
Yeah.
That was on last, you know, that kind of stuff. So you don't see much. I think the diving's not as much as it was.
It's kind of getting curbed.
See that era you're talking about? When he played football and that. They had the statement, you tackle in instalments.
But what do you mean?
And you could
just
hit
been
them 2 or 3
nicking
times
away
in the one tackle.
Oh, right. Oh, God's sake. Don't tell Scott Brown that. Could be in a lot of trouble. Right, I'm going to jump over loads of cracking bits with Jock Stein coming in as a player. And it was surprising how Sean really made him, if you like, because when Sean was the captain and then he gets injured, and then everybody's like, oh, well, you know, it's going to go here, it's going to go there. And he's like, no, I see something. I see something there. And he picks him. You know, and that leads on to loads and loads of stuff. The bit I noted about that was they made Jock Stein his vice captain to stop folk like the younger members of the team like Tully and these kind of guys, because they all says at the start when they signed Stein, when they signed this old guy. That's right. Yeah. He was getting abused as soon as he came in the front door.
So,
But
Sean Fallon says, well, I'll put a stop to that. He's my vice-captain.
And you liked how he read the game, didn't he? This is something they
Yeah.
shared, this vision, this hope for football.
I think there was obviously always something about Steen as a personality, and I think he was just an impressive man, and Sean appreciated that right from the start. Even he was given quite a hostile reception by a lot of the players, as you'll know, because Celtic had a lot of centre-halves at the time, and their pals and everything thought, what's this guy doing? He's got no pedigree, he's, Albion Rovers and non-league football in Wales, what are we doing signing this guy? And even what I was surprised about was I always knew that he hadn't been a glamorous player at that point, Jock Stein, but what I hadn't realised was that he wasn't really regular in the team when Sean made him his vice-captain, and he had these obvious alternatives. He had Bobby Evans, who was Scotland international, really established at the club, influential. Bertie Peacock,
He's a good friend, Bertie Peacock,
And he said always, he said Bertie Peacock didn't make an issue of it, but he said he did feel in later years he felt bad about it. But Bertie Peacock went on to become Celtic captain. He was still fairly young at that stage, so I felt a little bit better. But it just shows you, because then, fate takes a hand. Sean breaks his arm, isn't playing in the Coronation Cup. Jock Stein is a captain for the Coronation Cup, and becomes an overnight hero almost.
Brilliant. There's tons of stuff
story
in
about
there.
them, wasn't it?
What's that?
That was always the quiz question.
What's that?
The three brothers that played for Celtic and won the league.
Right.
Evans, Steen and Peacock. On the Masons.
Brothers with a capital B, is it? Oh, he got us again. That's 2 points to Sandy. Right, honestly, there's tons of fantastic insights we've seen. There's probably a few more I can grab, but jump on to 54. Massive time for Sean's career. Celtic win the double. Sean scores the winning goal in the Scottish Cup final, 2-1 over Aberdeen. Mr Kelly, who you met earlier, he is adamant it hit off of his knee and went in. Any comment, Colin?
I think I've seen it. I'm pretty sure it maybe bobbed up with his shin. I wouldn't say his knee. It wasn't. Sean admitted himself. It wasn't a wonder strike.
Right.
That's for sure. It's funny the angle of the TV shows. It's quite a strange one. It goes from being a kind of typical TV angle to being behind the goal. I've never seen another angle of it apart from being behind the goal, just Sean knocking it in. But it was funny. As you know that you've seen the Sligo champion said it was a great shot from 18 yards, and it was
keeps getting bigger and bigger.
18 inches, But
whole story. Conley's there was a few of them as well. Now after that, this is such a fantastic time for him. Sligo Town Council, they arrange a big celebration dinner for him because he goes obviously home every year. There's a band that plays him coming into town. Jimmy McGrory speaks at the dinner and says he's a credit to Sligo on and off the field, and very importantly Sean's own father toasts him, and something that men didn't really do at that time, obviously kind of speaking how they felt, saying his Hampden goal was the proudest moment of his life and there is no prouder father than I. Great thing when you were chatting away to him and he's thinking about those times.
It was hard getting him off his father at times, actually.
Was it?
I think I don't know. I think that's quite a common thing. Your long-term memory is strongest, and maybe as he was talking about his family things, his early days, his childhood, it became so important to him. And he was, as you know, if you've read on the book, he was not an Iron Man as a personality. He was a very emotional man and a very tender man when it came to moments about his father and everything. He would be crying all the time. I don't think I ever interviewed him.
Don't say it, but let me tease them with saying X Factor. Right, and I'll just leave that for the listeners. When they get the book, they'll know what I mean. But carry on.
As I say, I don't think I ever went up to see him. And at first, when I went up to see him, and I was speaking to him about his father, and he started crying, I felt terrible. I thought I've really upset him here. By going into areas maybe he doesn't want to talk about. And I was saying to his wife Myra, I said, I'm sorry about that. I didn't want to upset him, and she said, don't be daft, he does that every night anyway, So they watching something on the telly, and his family were saying watching the soaps or something, but they said to the Quiet Man, Quiet Man was his favourite film.
That's right,
every time he watches that.
There you go, that's touched your button, right?
You could honestly, and after that I relaxed about it. I just realised he was going to start crying.
This is him.
Yep.
Brilliant. Now, you talk about getting into the family home and stuff. The family home, very kind of peaceful, no flamboyant, nice, warm, welcoming home. Hardly any football stuff in it. Loads of photographs with his family and Sligo itself. But there was one wee thing that was on display. What was that?
It was his wee 7-1 trophy, the one he got at the Greatest Ever Celt Awards for the Greatest Ever Old Firm game. and the little trophy on top of his TV. And I mean, he loved. That was great. It was whenever he talked about the 7-1 game, he'd sing the song "Hand in the Sun," you know. He liked the song. He loved singing that, and that was one thing I was quite surprised me when he told me was he said for him 7-1 was above Lisbon. You know,
Yes.
he said that not he said not in terms of significance. He appreciated Lisbon was bigger for Celtic in terms of their history, but he said that for his own enjoyment, he said that for him playing for Celtic, he couldn't beat. You know, he said that he loved the time with Steen. It was a better time as assistant manager, a better time for Celtic. But he said going out there, pulling on the hoops, you know, going out with your own efforts and winning a game like that. He said you couldn't beat it. And he said, you know, and that was one game that the memories always there, you know.
Just there.
Yeah,
Rangers would be dominant at that time.
Well, that's the thing, because you know, you say 7-1 to a young fan, 7-1, I'd be trounced them. Most lopsided cup final in Britain to this day, biggest win in the Glasgow Derby history, all this kind of stuff. But it was right out of the blue. You know, we were just nowhere. Rangers had won the last 2 league titles, and after Celtic won in '54, they went back to finishing 5th place for the 2. I mean, what? And then this, so it really is a pinnacle or a remarkable milestone in Celtic's history, isn't it?
And that was 5th places were pretty much the norm. You know, the 54 title was very much an exception in that era, and you had, you know, I think there's a stat in the book or something. Sean's first 3 seasons, Celtic lost more games than they won. It's just incredible. You can't imagine that with Celtic these days.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
1954 and then 65 the next time they won the title.
No, the cup.
But
They won the cup for 11 years.
To win the title.
Was it 65, 66 they won the title?
66, yeah.
65, 66. 66 they won the title, and then they played in the European Cup in 67, didn't they?
Yeah.
One hell of a
In
band.
65 they won the cup, and they hadn't won the cup for 54.
Mental. So, player to coach. This transition, those injuries we touched upon, it was finally the knees that got him, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And ridiculous stuff. Before every game, he's going up to the Royal.
To get his knee drained and blood taken out of it and everything. And
Cortisone injections. And
he certainly gave everything he did to keep going, but it seemed that he had been playing. He was one of these players that improved with age, and even though he was 6 years old when people realised he was getting to his peak almost. You know, he was one of these. He never had much pace anyway, so his reading the game was better than ever. And I think he felt he wasn't ready to give up, but he just had to in the end because it was just ridiculous. And again, I think he was going to be one of these footballers that could end up not being able to walk. And you know, if he kept going, he was causing himself that amount of damage. And his knees were the things in later life that was the things that caused him a fair amount of problems. He always admitted he was lucky. You know, I especially love the age he did, and the amount he smoked especially was incredible. You know, but the knees bothered him definitely, and he'd one in particular, the one that forced him to give up, because he said. The funny thing was, even then, he said that he probably could have played on, but they made a mess of the operation. He said the doctor left a bit of cartilage floating about after doing the operation, and he said that pretty much finished him off. But he was devastated to give up, because, as I say, it was playing was just the ultimate for him. You know?
And he never thought about the next step. He wasn't ready for that, really.
His thought, there was a few interviews.
Almost.
Yeah, well, it was. I think if he'd had the injuries a couple of years earlier, maybe even a year earlier, I think he'd never had Sean Fallon again at Celtic. I think he would have gone back to Ireland, because that was always his plan. There's various interviews in the early 50s where he says, I'm going to go back to Sligo, because he just loved Sligo, and he was going to go back, maybe be involved in Sligo Rovers, or have some kind of involvement back there. And then he meets Myra, his wife, just before he finishes up his football career, and then Celtic make him the offer of staying as a coach, and he stays in Glasgow, having said all along he was going to go back to Ireland.
Aye, well, you've picked in two things that actually brought them together nicely. Bertie Peacock, Charlie Tully, bang, straight back to Ireland. As soon as it finished, that's my plan, I'm going. So, he had that, but Sean stayed in Glasgow. The other part of that puzzle, Myra, met her at a party, took ages to kind of court her, if you like. And there's loads of lovely stories in the book about them meeting, going dancing together, all this kind of stuff. And you yourself, you touch upon sitting in with them, and the jokes and the humour and the slaggings and the cheek back and forth. And can you touch upon that? Is that something that was nice to kind of be part of?
It's lovely. I mean, they made you feel so welcome, and so it was so natural. It wasn't like they were kind of putting in airs and graces. They were always great hosts, but they just have such a laugh with each other, and they'd be, the thing that stayed in the book was Sean would always say, you were lucky, weren't you, Mike? You were so lucky.
By the way,
a fine man like
you
me.
popped into my head when I heard that. You and Jackie.
She's one lucky woman.
But as soon as she's out of the room, he's coming clean.
That's
with you.
right. And he's, he was really. It was lovely, those moments, where she would leave the room and he'd say, "God, I want to watch there. I want a prize." Was always his phrase. I wouldn't change it for the world. And it was such a lovely. That was really heartwarming, and she's just a lovely woman herself, and well clothed in Celtic. I remember speaking to a couple of the journalists from that era, and they say, Myra knows her stuff, doesn't she? And she was, because she was always quite, friendly with Lady Kelly, and all the kind of, she was always at the games, and she was great. A practical help as well, in terms of little tidbits here and there, and things that she could prompt Sean on as well, because if Sean, maybe his memory and certain things wasn't the strongest, she could say, "Remember that, Sean? Writing off Myra." But
was Myra a source of some of these photographs? For the listeners, again, there's two nice wee sections with some cracking photographs in the book. Where are they all coming from? And did you have a bit of fun going through treasure chests with these things? Aye.
Amazing. He's managed to somehow share them out through a lot of his family, which he's done really well with, and they've all got. I think there was someone in touch with me asking if they'd like, if his memorabilia basically sorted, and they would do it for the family. And I don't know whether the family are pursuing that, but there'll be some job, because it is like suitcases. It's like a suitcase you open and it's just a mess of photos and old newspapers and everything. But you can imagine, you're just sitting there in an afternoon, big smile on your face, going through all this. And there was some cracking photos, and the guys at the publisher said that it's easily, by a mile, our best photo section we've ever had in the book, because you've got such a wide variety. You get photos back from him making his first communion when he's 2 years old in the Sligo Celtic thing. But that was a funny story, because we'd gone to see Sean's house when I was over in Sligo with a guy, Sean Cunningham, who set up the Sean Fallon Celtic Supporters Club in Sligo, and he was a great host, and he was taking me around all the landmarks, and the house that Sean grew up in, the old working class area of Sligo, is still there.
Right.
And they took me along to this, and as we were walking down the street, these two guys came out and they say, "How you doing, Sean?" And it was one of Sean's kind of distant cousins. And they said, "Oh, you're doing a book? I've got a great photo of him," bringing out the photo of Sean when he's 2 years old, and this Sligo Celtic team photo, and it just that was the way things worked all along. And again, you get little things that you pick up from most unusual sources. Class, amazing. And the photos, and I think they're great. And again, same as the stories, you had to leave out so many brilliant photos.
I'll bet.
It's just, and with the nice, I think the family were finding new ones. You did different ones from different sources, and even online on Celtic fan sites and things, you'd find ones and you'd be able to track them down where they came from. And it's brilliant.
Aye. Fantastic. Right, I'm going to jump over loads of bits about the Kelly kids. I'm jumping over Jock leaving and Sean staying, because this is the point where obviously Steen goes to Dunfermline. There's some nice insights about, and I think this is the case with most successful people, to be honest, lifelong learner. He was never, I know the score. Yeah. There was loads of things when he's talking about, he was really excited about going to Largs for his coaching badges. He's excited about going and watching the England-Hungary game. He always wants to improve himself and learn stuff, and he's got loads of notes on things, and then he carries that on to the responsibility he feels for the young players as well. And one of the got a nice wee story that then pops out of that. Again, honestly, I'm skipping over tons and tons here, but Sean, in that period, Jock's away. Sean wants to try something, so he puts one of his new practices into place. So it's the first close season after Jock Stein has left. And what he did, when the 28 players came in and arrived that day, this made the news, right? This was on the news. What did he do?
Gave them all a football each, and that was, massive news in the press, and that all the players had a football to work with. And I found that really that the early 60s, that was when I went up to interview Sean. I thought, I'm looking forward to asking him about this, because I was a big admirer, and I always thought he was underappreciated, and he'd done so much more than people gave him credit for.
Sure.
But I always thought the early 60s was a bit of an unanswered, and because there's been so many books about Lisbon, the glory years, and the 9 in a row and everything, but the early 60s had maybe been glossed over a little bit. And I thought, why was this guy, who obviously had, clever football man, had ideas about the game, why did he not impact things more? And maybe you're coming to that, but he admitted himself he didn't do enough in that time, and it was, I think, the one area that maybe let him down, and maybe as well, I think he's very unfortunate in his the way he's seen by a lot of Celtic fans, that people remember him for the early 60s and 1975-76 when Jock Stein had his car crash. In both periods, Sean was a bit more high profile during those times, and it wasn't his finest hour, although in both had mitigating factors, but he admits the early 60s especially, he could and should have done more. But there was the politics with basically Jimmy McGrory, who was wary of him and Jockstein, of Sean and Jockstein, thinking they were trying to take over. And so Sean was kind of caught in this position of wanting to try and implement things. But he felt if Jimmy McGrory said to Bob Kelly, I want this guy going, he said Bob Kelly did idolise Jimmy McGrory, even though he overruled him in pretty much everything, and he said he would have been gone. He said if Bob Kelly had to choose between me and Jimmy McGrory, it would have been me who was out the door.
Contest.
Yeah.
What was the feelings like about just in the early 60s, Jim, before kind of Steen arrived, when it was McGrory, was there kind of discontent amongst the sport?
Well, you wasn't doing a great deal at all. Like, your highlight was if you beat the Rangers.
That was right.
Yeah.
That kept you going basically to the next thing.
And then, I think Clyde was the first team we played a replay with. We'd never been beaten a replay in the Scottish Cup.
Right.
And then Clyde beat us, and then I think Hearts beat us. We're getting beat left, right and centre after that. Rangers beat us. Replays and that.
Yeah.
And then we had the 1-0.
Right.
The Fairland beat us, didn't it?
54. We had the 1-0 up to 65.
Himself at that
Steen
point?
was the manager.
He was the manager.
Well, you never won the Scottish Cup, you never the league and that, that was you were
a miserable time then.
And it's what I found
a
amazing.
miserable time. You still enjoyed yourself going to Celtic games,
Aye, just trophy wise.
Because you're allowed drink in the park.
Oh, for God's sake. You were right, Brian. You were so right about this, boy.
You could drown your sorrow.
One of the things I had no idea about until I started really researching this was how much stick greats like Bobby Murdoch and things took during that era. Young boys who were thrust in and maybe just weren't quite ready, and they had no experienced players to help them along, and they really took pelters, and some of them went under. Guys that people said were talented, but just couldn't stand the pressure. It was only guys like Bobby Murdoch who just kept going. And there was I think he was ready to emigrate to Australia at one point because he was just so sick of it. And but John Hughes took absolute dog's abuse when he was like 17. He was chucked into the team and he brilliant one week, terrible the next. You'll probably remember. You might remember that yourself. And again, just absolutely hammered by the fans because they were just sick. And again, they took because the players were on the field, they took the stick that was going for Bob Kelly basically.
Exactly.
Well, if you take my era, like to the 50s, was a lean period. Then you come in when Steen come in, then with a great period, and then taking the likes of yourselves that sort of just missed the Steen era.
Yep.
Yous come in a bit, then it faded again, and then it started coming back again, For me, so when Steen was there, you were in the European Champions. Well, no, the Champions League, the European Cup every year.
Aye, and that's what you're getting used to.
You were good in quarter-finals and semi-finals.
Semi-finals, quarter-finals, final.
It just wasn't qualifying out a group.
Exactly.
What was amazing was how subtle the changes were as well. It wasn't like he came in and did anything remarkable and revamped the whole squad. And Sean said it was really just a case of discipline and confidence. It was really, he instilled a lot of discipline in the club. The training obviously improved, but he said he gave the players confidence. The players believed so much in Steen. They saw that this guy was just exuded success. Exactly, and they thought he'll make us winners.
The bit I wrote down here, what I thought about Jock Steen and Sean Fallon as a kind of team. He says Steen was more kind of seen as the father figure, hard but fair, whereas Sean was seen as approachable. You could confide in
players could talk to. That certainly came out from loads of players.
I don't think Sean could have went, and I think it was proved once Steen. I mean, you say Mick, but I don't think Sean was a manager, if you know what I mean. I don't think so.
Well, is that fair? Because the book goes in and out and stuff, and there's a month where he is the manager and he's in control and they have great results.
Yeah.
There's the car crash thing where you say, or the media says, or the fan says he's the manager, but he's not, because Jock's in the background.
Yeah.
And he's making decisions that aren't really like Jockstein because people say he's changed after that. And that's where he gets a lot of that. Well, the phrase you kind of popped out there was retrospective sniping. People look back.
I mean, I think it's one of these things you can, if you're going to compare him against Jockstein, it's just impossible. And he admits himself he could never have had the impact. But would he improve things? Everyone that was there at that time said that Sean, given authority, if he took authority, would have definitely improved things. And he would have. But again, would he have got that authority? Would he be able to get it off Bob
That's
Kelly?
it,
Because
exactly.
Jock Stein had to fight for it. But Jock Stein came in with a position of having proved at Dunfermline and Hibs that
Correct.
he was a manager who deserved it, who had earned that right to be given the choices, to get, given the responsibility to make all these decisions.
Yeah.
But I found that was really interesting. I thought, again, a big fork in the road, because he could easily go on with Sean as manager.
Correct.
And what would have happened? Sean would admit, you're not winning the European Cup in '67, but you'd like to think that Celtic would have come back, and all the players, the guys that played in his reserve team, which I suppose, did see him as a manager and seen what kind of manager he would have been. They were all, he would have been a good manager, and if he'd done the same as Stein, they felt, if he'd gone away and managed another club,
Aye, there's
and come
quite a
back.
few quotes about that. Go down to England or something, you probably just broke the mould in the same way. And touching on the players, obviously we say Jock Stein, we say Lisbon Lions, we say it kind of trips off the tongue, but by the time that Stein comes back, Sean himself has done the whole task of bringing together 10 of the Lisbon Lions. He's got them all there and ready, and he should have had the 11th. But as it turned out, the board kept messing him up because he kept trying to say, was it McBride? Was it Joe McBride?
He tried to sign
Wallace.
Well,
Wallace was 11th.
Stein's first big signing, sorry, Joe McBride. He should have also been there, but Sean had tried 3 times to sign him, but the board kept messing it up as usual.
Again, I didn't know that. That was something I didn't know before I started
Incredible.
researching the book, and I spoke to Joe only a couple of months before he passed away, and again, another really lovely man, and he told me this story, and I said, three times, I think I'd maybe known there was one approach, I didn't know it was through Sean, but he said 3 times, he gave me the times. He said each time Celtic board was just too cheap. He said the first time they let Luton outbid them, and second time they let Thistle outbid them, and then the third time they just wouldn't pay the wages, they wouldn't pay what Motherwell were asking. And he said that even in the end, he said basically when Sean phoned him to say, we're in for you again, he said, Sean, sod off, honestly. He said I've messed about too much by Celtic. He said, because I think in those days he'd been out of contract at Motherwell and he hadn't signed his new contract, but it wasn't like these days where obviously with his Bosman you can walk out, but he wasn't getting paid. But Sean said, look, Celtic, we're coming in for you. And then Celtic board dragged their feet, and then ended up, but he'd lost all this money during the summer, so Joe McBride was raging at Celtic. So he wasn't happy with the way they dealt with him previously, but obviously in the end up. But again, Sean didn't hold that against him, because they paid the same amount for Joe McBride that they would have done when Sean would wanted him, and it was just Jock Stein basically forced him to pay it. But again, Sean didn't bother about that. He wasn't angry about it or bitter about it, which I found really impressive about him.
Yeah, he's an impressive character. On that with the talent spotting, I mean, I think that's where loads of folk know him.
Yeah.
We've got, if I grab some highlights here, and just an amazing list of signings to be on. Best known for grabbing the Rangers fans, Kenny Dalglish and Danny McGrain. Equally significant in keeping Tommy Gemmell and Bobby Murdoch away from Motherwell. Ronnie Simpson, that's the one where there's this quote-unquote the old guy who's finished, and that's not just other players or other managers talking about it, that's Ronnie Simpson.
Yeah.
He's actually ready to act. He's between signing for Berwick Rangers or becoming a journalist. And Sean, he's got this skill, he just sees it, doesn't he? And he uses it to his advantage, because he says, I'm just signing him for a reserve keeper to talk the price down. And then, of course, what does Ronnie Simpson go on and achieve, in the game? It's just remarkable.
Yeah,
absolutely remarkable.
Amazing. I mean, Ronnie Simpson had already started doing reports for a Sunday newspaper.
Did he? Right, so
this
right.
future Lisbon Lion who was doing match reports for a Sunday newspaper, and was all set to just chuck football altogether. And it's amazing. He said it, as you say, and again, that was one of the great pleasures in doing this, was you got to go over, to go to Mitchell and dig out Ronnie Simpson's autobiography from 1968 and things, and again, just little things you think, God, he was really that. He couldn't believe Celtic went in for him. He thought, what are you thinking of? What are you thinking about signing me? I'm finished, and yet there you go. A couple of years later, he's making 200 appearances for Celtic, playing for Scotland in the 3-2 game at Wembley and all that, and Player of the Year in Scotland he was. So incredible. He never forgot Sean for it. He always was very.
There's so
grateful.
many players that look back on him, and so many just kind words after kind words. I mean, the impact he's had on Celtic with collecting all these players is just ridiculous.
I mean, so the T sign on the Lisbon, the most of the Lisbon, or were they all come through the youth system? If you know,
there was the Lisbon Lions. The Quality Street kids were pretty much his. The Lisbon Lions, there was, and he was very keen to acknowledge this. Like so Bobby Murdoch, he said, "Well, Bobby Murdoch wasn't really mine." He said, "I went out and signed him at his house." He said the first man to spot him was Bob Kelly. Bob Kelly actually spotted him in a public park at Rutherglen. And he said, that wasn't a usual thing. But he said, he'd spotted Tommy Gemmell. But again, he said all these guys came through scouts and things. But there were ones that weren't quite clear cut. Billy McNeil, he was there with Jock's team when he signed, but he wouldn't have described Billy McNeil as a Sean Fallon signing. So the ones that were absolutely were Tommy Gemmell, Jim Craig, Bertie, as we'll probably discuss.
Bertie, commonly thought of as Steen signing, but you found kind of put timelines together and it didn't make sense.
Well, it was more Sean himself said, that like he said I never wanted to make a big deal of it, kind of go, but the kind of accepted wisdom over time has been that Jock Stein lined Bertie Auld up in advance of coming back, and wanted him in, and he said Jock didn't want Bertie at all. He advised me. He was arguing with Bob Kelly for months about getting Bertie Auld back. And he said that Jock Stein said, no, he's trouble, I wouldn't do it if I was you. He was, he's still at Hibs at that point, and he said that Bertie Auld, he's got a temper, and he proved that there in England. And he said that he was one round in the end very much, and he loved Bertie, Jock Stein in the end. But he said, no, he was definitely not a case of him arguing for it. When he was at Hibs, he was in the Bob Kelly camp saying, no, we shouldn't be bringing this guy back. He's a troublemaker, basically. So he had to fight. He said, so that's just one of these myths that's developed over the years.
Exactly.
And it wasn't like Sean was kind of, again, bitter about this, and he certainly has never come out, but he said, we're talking about Bertie Auld, and he said, no, I had to really argue with Bob Kelly. And it wasn't like he was trying to claim credit.
No.
He was just putting
just
the record straight.
While we're talking.
Yeah.
So there's all these characters, just legends, just left, right and centre. And I love this bit with the kind of... It's not just that this guy can look at a player and go, oh, he can make it. Or look at a player that thinks he's finished and go, no, if I do such and such with him or change his position, he'll be fine. It's not just that, just seeing them. It's what he's done as a networker. And one of the guys that works with him, John Higgins, says, officially, the club has just 9 scouts covering Scotland and Ireland. Unofficially, we have 9,000.
Yeah.
He goes on to that. Listen to this wee list of players, right? This is the kind of tip-offs they get. If you think of these guys, Macari, McGrain, Hay and Tommy Burns, right? Those legends in the game. They all came through to Sean through a bookie, a publican, a priest and a car dealer. Right? This is the kind of inputs he's getting and tip-offs and, oh, Sean, and try this and go here, and he's travelling up and down the country. I mean, it's remarkable.
Amazing. And the thing I found as well was that he always acted upon these tip-offs. You think if you get a call from a guy, a club, you think, very good, I'm sure he's a nice player. But Sean would always go and check these guys out. And he said that and the great one example later on, again, was getting a letter from Vic Davis's mother saying, my son's a great player, And you think, well, your mother's not exactly the most objective judge of how great you are, But he said, I'll go and check out this guy anyway. And then sure enough, he goes and sees, and Vic Davison's playing the same team as Kenny Dalglish, and history's made because he sees these two great Celtic players and the advice basically of a letter from Vic Davison's mother, but that was it. It was his motto was, you've got to check it out. The worst mistake is not to make the effort.
So they didn't know Dalglish was not on the radar.
No,
it wasn't for Vic Davison's mother.
Exactly, aye.
It's bonkers, isn't it? It's just bonkers. All these wee stories. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, 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 tock.
Right, now, Jock Stein and Sean Fallon, I have honestly skipped over tons, and that's no counting the tons that I never even put in these pages, but let me go into 2 areas here. First of all, the yin and yang to Jock, as I've called it, the perfect counterbalance to fill in all the gaps that Stein wasn't good at. Never a yes man, and good at checking Jock on those things, but very importantly, and this is a loyalty I put under this banner of loyalty, never in public. And a couple of people pick up on this. Bertie Auld, one of the few people brave enough to tell Jock exactly what he thought, but always a united front in front of the players. But I do know that they did disagree in a few things. So he had this loyalty thing. And the final one there, Danny McGrain, there were never any mixed messages. If Mr Stein decided that the team had to jump off the Erskine Bridge at 8 a.m, Sean would tell the players to make sure they were there for 7:55. I mean, that's fantastic how he encapsulates that. But that's true, it was total loyalty, no matter what he thought, and they would bounce ideas off each other all the time, didn't they?
And Danny McGrain, I thought, right through, just got Sean, and just was, he was, I mean, and I think one thing I found astounding again was going back one of the old books. If anyone ever gets a chance, go back and read Danny McGrain's 1978 autobiography. It's absolutely stunning. I mean, people talking about the Fergie book and things just now. He absolutely savages the Celtic team at that time, like his own teammates, the guys he's still in a dressing room with, because they've just, disgracing the club, and as far as he's concerned. And you wouldn't think of that of Danny, or I certainly wouldn't have thought. I always thought Danny was fairly mild-mannered and, doesn't court controversy or anything, but he came out with some great quotes for the book, and I thought that really was, like, in terms of summing up the loyalty Sean had. Because again, Sean obviously had been passed over for the job, and maybe other people would have felt, well, I need to sometimes flex my own muscles and show that I've got an opinion too. But he said, that anything that Jockstein said, Sean would just reinforce it. And he said, and Sean obviously speaks in the book about the areas he did disagree with Jockstein on at times.
The Charlatelli thing and so on,
of course,
that whole aspect.
Drinking. And he said some things I'd convince him, some things I wouldn't. But I think the quote was, once a decision was made by Jock, as far as I was concerned, it was our decision. And I would back it up. There's no afterwards. Right. Basically, if it went wrong, he wasn't going to go back and say, "Well, I told you so," and say to the players, "Well, I told him not to play that guy," or it was our decision, was his view. And I think he said that's what, and everyone in football says that's what is unity. Because once you've got an assistant that will start chipping away underneath a manager, it's a slippery slope.
Aye. Now the second point, the kind of part of that relationship I kind of wanted to bring up was it's not just a good cop, bad cop. It's no him getting in and kicking in, dressing room, you're a tubing in it. No, son, and he'll kind of nicely mollycoddle him. He won't, he'll stick to that part of the line, just like you say, but he'll just say it in a different way. Yeah. And some of the things that came out of that was Sean Fallon, many people have said that he was very high in what you might call today emotional intelligence, how he could read people and see how they were feeling, and communication skills. Joe McBride called it a sixth sense. Sean's own kids reckon that if he hadn't made it in football, he could have been a top psychologist. And Billy McNeil, for all his qualities, Jock needed Sean. He was able to supply all of the things that the big man wasn't particularly good at. And that, I felt, was the kind of other angle of it, wasn't it? He could see this, he could pick out the mood of a player, he could see exactly where to kind of guide them and take them. And
that's one thing I think, I mentioned in the prologue, was I think it's never really appreciated about Sean is that Steen's become the one man, and obviously it would never have happened without Steen. He was the manager and the man who led it all. But you look at other examples, in the Clough and Taylor one is the one I mentioned, because and everyone appreciates what Taylor brought to that partnership and how he played almost exactly the same role as Sean. Talent spotting, Cameron disputes behind the scenes and all that, but he gets the credit, and there's, like I say, the statues of Peter Taylor that are, and everyone knows Clough and Taylor, but Sean did exactly the same role, and I'd say arguably better, because you look at his list of signings, and the publishers, when they read it, they can't believe it. They said, has there ever been a better talent spotter in British football history? And you're trying to think, I can't think of one. We were trying to think, and certainly like Taylor, who's known as this genius talent spotter. I think Sean's record was a fair bit better, certainly towards the end of Taylor's time. So, that was one thing. And I think that was the key phrase from Bill McNeil was Jock needed him. It wasn't like a case of that he could have. And another people said, that they would have. Celtic, Jockstein was a great manager anyway. He'd been successful at Dunfermline without Sean Fallon being successful at Hibs, but Sean was just an essential ingredient in that, and that was a key thing that the players were keen to get across. Was it wasn't like he just put out the cones and did the odd bit. He was really, really essential to the whole makeup of the backroom staff. Yeah.
I'm going to skip over the 65 final, read about that. I'm going to skip over loads of stories about European adventures, ridiculous plane journeys, some of them had me chuckling. Some cracking insights about tactical changes, training setups. There is tons of stuff you will read about in this, I swear to you. There's the incident where Bob Kelly finally gets to butt out of everything and Steen becomes the man. That's all fascinating. Want to mention here a wee funny one. What happened, pop quiz, when Celtic, on an American tour in Bermuda, bumped into Bruce Forsyth?
I sure enjoyed telling this one.
I'll bet you did.
He ended up going fishing with Miss World. And to be honest, I've discovered in recent years that Bruce Forsyth shouldn't really have been there with Miss World. I think he was married at the time, and she was his girlfriend.
No danger! Yeah, beauty.
So this was a young Miss World, and I think Bruce Forsyth, even those days, I think he was like 20 years or senior or whatever. And he was he went for a game of golf, and Sean and the guys had moved to get him on for a game of golf, but Sean was going fishing. I said, would you mind taking my girlfriend fishing? No problem. It turned out it was Miss World. So, aye, wasn't his worst fishing trip in the way.
Hard day at the office, yeah. Now, Lisbon, you mentioned earlier, loads of stuff in there. Example of the character I wanted to bring out, but just kind of one wee story. There's this build-up, and you'll certainly know this, Mr S, Celtic's underdogs. It's these young Scots guys, this is Inter Milan. It's the top guys, the professionals, the superstars, the models, highly paid, you name it. Everything you can think of. There's loads of stories about the bus getting, deliberately or not deliberately mislaid, going to the kind of stadium and stuff. They eventually reach there, they're trying to get themselves sorted, this young team, in this incredible situation. And you're thinking, what's something that could spark them? What's something that could show them, no, you can't think like that. You've got to think that you can take this. You've got to think above where you are and what you are. And here it comes. Their manager, who was Herrera, of course, as you know, superstar manager, globally known, he tries a wee bit of gamesmanship. He tries to steal Celtic's bench right before kick-off, and Sean spots him. And what does he do?
I think it was the phrase Billy McNeil used was that he threatened to set about him. I mean, that was, and again, I think Herrera, people say that Herrera was kind of the Mourinho of his day, very much,
cocky,
cocky, and you liked his mind games, and I think that was all part of that. And it was Sean and I think Jock Stein had a few words with him as well, and he scuttled off his tail between his legs, and Billy McNeil said just looking over at that gave you a boost. Just seeing that these guys have no fear, so why should we have any fear? And that. Just little psychological things, and it's again, as you say, he seemed, in terms of emotional intelligence, and again, I think he wouldn't have stood for that anyway. I think he was a principled man.
Man of principle,
that's
absolutely. Not fair, that's not right, I'm getting in there. Aye.
And there was no sense of inferiority, I think that comes out later, and again, I'm not skipping ahead, but when he talks about Jock Stein nearly going to Manchester United,
yes,
and he says, as far as I'm concerned, it wasn't a move up, because he said at Celtic in those days, we were one of the best teams in Europe. There was no, with our team, it wasn't like it is these days where Man United have got this masses of wealth and everything. He said, okay, Jock's team would have been paid more, but he said Celtic were a team with massive possibilities, and as far as I was concerned, moving there wouldn't have been a move up for him. So he'd no sense of Celtic being below anyone. As far as he was concerned, he'd tipped Celtic to win in the build up to the game, and he'd been able to see.
And he got in trouble for that.
Aye, that's right. I mean, Jock Stein gave him a trouble saying, that could whatever wind up Inter. I don't know how they would get wind of it, but or make the players complacent. But the one thing and another thing that showed how much Jock Stein respected Sean was that he took him on every trip, to scout a player, to scout an opposition team in Europe. Sean would be with him, and Sean had obviously been out to see Inter, and he felt that Celtic had the measure of them, and despite the fact Inter were the big favourites, and he'd said Celtic will win and they'll win 2-1, and Jock Stein fell out him for a while. That spot on, obviously. Called it right.
Brilliant. The other wee cracking one, just to leave in the Lisbon thing, and I love the way you painted this, because you could actually see it in front of you. After that monumental game that we all know about, even the guys that weren't alive at the time, is the two of them, Sean and Jock, in a wee room after the game, just drinking tea, pot after pot of tea, in the big European cups there, and they just glance over at it from time to time, and all they did was just talk about every single tiny wee detail in that game. And I felt, as well as being a beautiful story about the game, that was them, because Ferraris in Glasgow you talk about at lunchtime, they just talk for hours, and that's how simple it is. This is the ultimate prize.
Yeah.
But in essence, those two guys just love football.
That's it. And I mean, as you know, there's a whole chapter basically just dedicated to their relationship.
I'm brushing over tons here.
And I thought it was just lovely, like a lot of the kind of moments, he was saying that they never, Jock would always arrange for them a room together. On these trips, he never arranged a room for the manager, and they'd room together so Jock could keep him up talking about football all night, and he said, but he loved that, and he said things like that. Again, neither of them drank, so they just sit, pots of tea, talking football, and that was what Sean said. He missed. He said because no one talked football like Jock, and he said when Jock Stein died, he said he felt like no one to talk football like that much, anymore with, and that things, little images like that, and the fact his kids called Jock Stein Uncle Jock, and even when they were spending all this time together, they'd go out to this, even the weekends, you think they'd be like going their own separate ways, but at nights they'd be going out with their wives to the beachwood, at weekends they'd be going out with their kids to the seaside, and just that window into Jock Stein the man and the character and the relationship they had, I just found so fascinating, like incredible. And that was one thing when I was down, when Alex Ferguson was speaking about Sean and Jock Stein, he was saying, I found that amazing, because he used to try and get in their conversations in the Beechwood. And he said, because I've never socialised my assistants. He said, at the end of the working day, you kind of want to go your own way. He said, I've always gone with them, but he said, you don't want to spend every waking hour with them. And he said, Sean and Jock just seemed to, everywhere they went, it was Sean and Jock together. And he said he just couldn't believe it. And he said it just shows what a closeness there was there. And that shows, exactly what a great insight he had into Jock Stein the man as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Mr S, you'll be glad about this. One of the big points and big areas I'm going to jump over involves Racing Club of Argentina. Right, so I don't want to increase your blood pressure on that one. The listeners can obviously get the book and get stuck in about loads of stories around that. Let me take you into happier times. After that, if I had to say to you, Celtic played an English team and there were two monumental games, who would that have been against?
Oh, Doncaster Rovers.
Correct, Leeds for 6 points. But this is just massive, isn't it? And it's something Sean just raves about, and just as a fan.
Well, you were talking about big crowds in the 50s. Well, that's the biggest crowd for a European game.
Right.
No, right, so that was the kind
And was that the Hampden Park one?
right. That's the kind of era then, you know what I mean? Celtic were getting the crowds in.
Aye.
And obviously they had the 138,000 Celtic supporters at the game, but there's just people, in fact there's quite a lot of people in Carluke follow Celtic.
Right.
You don't follow them now.
Right.
But used to walk about with Celtic scarves on because Celtic were doing that well.
Just right at that time.
And then as soon as Rangers were doing well, the scarves changed.
Right, okay. I think we know some of those folks. Now, just how big
I
this
know them
was.
all.
You know them all.
Still got a
Turn
scarf.
them back. Oh! That's a low one, Peter. A low one.
They'll not get their Rangers scarf, they might hang out with their Celtic.
Sevco. Right, Danny McGrain speaks of this. He says, that was Celtic's finest ever, hour and a half, and I am not forgetting Lisbon. I mean, this is how big and amazing the team played.
I mean, there are people that say that the Celtic teams that came after the Lisbon Lions were actually better. Like some of the 69 team going into 70, because you had the George Conleys and things coming in, and Davy Hay, and they basically improved what was this fantastic team already. You had these guys, and you had Lou Mackay knocking the door, Kenny Dalglish started knocking the door, and so they said that basically in terms of a squad and the players that were out there, it was a better team, but they just didn't have didn't have quite the spirit perhaps of the team, and maybe they were a little bit unlucky in some games, and the Inter Milan semi-final was one, but that was incredible. And I don't know if you came away with the same thing I did, but from having looked through it and having gone through it, I think people looking from the outside will see Celtic's history as well. Lisbon was the peak, and then they kind of dipped away a bit. Yeah, whereas it shouldn't have been that way, really. Celtic should have been, to my mind, having read it, it should have been an Ajax. They should have been a team that in the late 70s, European Cup fight, because they had if you look at the squad photos at that time, you've got the Lisbon Lions there, who were still a young team. I think their average age was 26 when they won the European Cup. So that team's got a long way to go, and then you've got these quality street gang coming in. We should have been.
Neil saying is better.
Exactly.
More talent.
And it should have been a dynasty of success, really. Celtic should have been the Ajax of Bayern Munich at that time. They really should have. And it was just a wasted opportunity, and it was avoidable. That's the most frustrating thing about it. Because you think, as I say, I think some young Celtic fans, of my generation and younger, will think, well, it's always been the way, Celtic can't compete with the big teams. You just can't compete. The big players are always going to go with England. But in those days, it wasn't TV rights deals. There weren't, sponsorships from Samsung and all these kind of things. It was gate money. Gate money was a thing, and Celtic were getting 60,000.
The crowds that you're talking
about.
All these crowds coming in.
Big long European runs. So,
how did you feel about that, Jim? Do you reckon that the team, say, the 1970 European Cup final, do you reckon
we thought it was a doddle.
Do you think it was a better team than the Lisbon Lions?
No, really, because the Lisbon Lions won that when they were coming into sort of, they were just all go together,
right,
and won it. Whereas the team that went to the next final were some of the Lisbon Lions plus others.
Aye, right, okay, so there's more expected.
An improved team,
right.
But the Lisbon Lions were the Lisbon Lions, They were.
Sure.
You could go to the game, and we went to the Partick game, Celtic were playing that well, like, you know. We're doing 4-0. We're still expecting a victory. Still,
watched that at the
well,
weekend,
we're not even bored at half time.
Nah,
Still expecting a victory.
Did it?
We watched it.
I think it was Alan Ruff. I think they'll come bang beers in the centre.
And we did that at half time.
I'm sure it was
Seriously?
Alan Ruff or somebody said that.
Oh, you dancer.
We bring a
You see, if you were doing 2-0, you wouldn't bother.
Sure.
You were going to win the game. That was the kind of attitude of the Celtic supporters then.
Right,
Didn't matter how many goals get scored against you,
right,
you were going to score one more.
right. Just
And
the
that was just that.
I think the point that some people were making was more a case of personality, because as you say, the Lions, what they can't be beaten as a team, but what people were saying, well, what is it, you know, so Jim Craig drops out and Davy Hay comes in. Is Davy Hay better than Jim Craig? Jim Craig's an old colleague of mine, I hope he's not listening, but most people would say yes, you know. John Clark drops out, George Conley comes in, you know, is George Conley better than John Clark? You know, and then later on,
They played different styles of football.
Yeah.
Clark just went to the back and he scooped everything up that was coming.
yeah,
You know, let the two wingers, the two half-backs go forward a bit. And he just stood at the back and anything, he was actually McNeil. And anything that came out, didn't matter what side, he seemed to be there.
do you know what's
Just seemed
funny?
to do that patrol.
Right.
Seemed to be there all the time.
The game, going back right to the start of our chat when we were talking about that game in Portugal with Kennedy Dalglish and John Clark, obviously with Kitman at the time, and he's playing in obviously a fair age already, John. Different class in that game again,
right?
just all that, just his positioning,
The
letting the ball
reading,
do the work, reading the game. You can see it all still, even all those
Just a
years later.
sweeper, you know.
Yeah,
Just a sweeper, just
yeah,
both
absolutely.
sides.
Brilliant. Right, I'll finalise the Leeds one by leaving another wee teaser. Read the story about the colour of socks. I'm just going to leave that there. Another wee bit of gamesmanship that was hilarious to read. Quality Street Gang, I'm going to jump over about 15 bullet points there. But the time's ridiculous and I can only apologise to the boys. But let me throw you this one. Why did signing Kenny Dalglish nearly cost Sean Fallon his marriage?
Well, it was his wedding anniversary, and he'd said to his wife and his 3 kids that he was going to take them out to the seaside, out to Seamill, to the hotel out there, and they'd have a nice wee day at the seaside. But he said, "Do you mind? I've just got this young boy," and Kenny Dalglish had been a bit reluctant to sign because he was a big Rangers fan and he was hoping Rangers would come in for him. And he said, "I've just got this boy. I'm going to try and he's worth signing. You might not stop in. It will take 5 minutes." And so he pops upstairs and he said it was a really uneasy atmosphere in the house. He said, I think he thought that Kenny and his father had been arguing, and he said, so he thought, I won't talk about football at the start or signing for Celtic, I'll just put them at ease and just chat about anything. And he said a couple of hours later he's still talking about nothing, you know, just putting them at ease. And then eventually he gets around to talking about, you know, football and Celtic, and eventually convinced, he said his father was really reluctant for Kenny to become a footballer. He wanted him to become a joiner and have a trade. And he said eventually he convinced him, you know, delighted with himself, chatting away about this is great, you know. He said, and then he looked at his clock, realised he'd been about 3 hours, and he was only realised when he was going down the stairs, and he said he got a very, very frosty reception.
Family's still out of the water.
He said it was freezing, you know, they'd left him outside in his Ibrox, just left him outside in the street, in the car, freezing. And of course, didn't end up going to see him, and he said Myra didn't speak to him for a week. And she said her line at the time was, I hope that boy was worth it.
And he was. So again, loads of stuff about the quality strand, great stuff to read. The Steen to Man United, fascinating period there as well. I'm going to skip over, but I'll make mention of it. I'm going to skip over the Ibrox disaster and how that involves Sean. And I think that probably typifies what I'm kind of doing here. We've kept it nice and light and stuff, but the book does touch on a lot of hard reading. Things that Sean went through, things he had to put up with, and you're not just reading a nice wee fluffy book when you do read this one. There's all the good points I've spoke about, but for time, for keeping you kind of teased, if you like, I'll jump over that. Let me jump to another interesting one, a wee interesting story, and it shows how Sean brings out 2 of his characteristics: his remarkable use of contacts and his peacemaking skills. And this is when Desmond White receives a letter that causes a bit of a stir. Who was the letter allegedly from, and what did it suggest was about to happen?
Oh, this was definitely amazing to me. I'd never heard anything like this ever. The letter was supposedly from the IRA, threatening to blow up Celtic Park, blow up the main stand at Celtic Park. Now,
You guys heard that?
No.
I'd just knocked me for 6 when I heard this. But
absolutely
carry on
incredible.
with the kind of
I think
storyline.
They seem to keep it quite So it was basically Desmond White called him into his office. He said he was shaking like a leaf. Sean said, and he said he got his letter in his hand, and he's saying, there's been a threat made, and it's. And Sean was saying, that doesn't make any sense to me. Why on earth would that be a threat made against Celtic Park? But he said Desmond White was taking it seriously enough, and he said whatever reason he had to do that. And he said, look, would you mind putting in some calls in Ireland? He said, I know it's a lot to ask, but can you try and get some contacts over there and try and find out if there's anything to this? And so Sean puts in a few calls, friends of family, so on. Ends up hearing back that the guys from the IRA will meet you in Dublin. So they go. I know.
Aye.
Yeah. So there's a meeting.
You've got to get this book, Brian.
There's a meeting fixed up in Dublin. Sean and Desmond White go over to meet these guys, and Sean says, supposedly from the IRA, he said Jock Stein wanted no part of it whatsoever. He said, no, you guys can go over, I'll leave it to you. And he said that they went over, and he said that these guys were. He said Desmond White was shaking like a leaf the whole time. White's a ghost. And he said they had to tell him, look, Mr. White, there are no guns here, But he said that they said, look, he said they were quite vague about it. He said they didn't want to go into too much. He said it's either a misunderstanding or a hoax. He said, that was they were told not to worry, basically, not to worry. There's nothing going to happen to Celtic Park. As he said it never made sense to me anyway, and it certainly didn't make any sense to me. But he said it was just a mad episode, one of these things that just, and again, just one of these stories that just jumps out at you, like something
fantastic.
You go in expecting to hear great stories from Sean Fallon. You don't expect to hear about going to meet the IRA about a threat to Celtic Park.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? So the boys are shaking their heads around this table. But honestly, those are the kind of wacky things and rabbit holes you go down with this book. Loads of stuff about the sad decline after Jock Stein's car crash, and some just fascinating insights from different angles and different anecdotes and what people felt about it and how that changed at the time. And sadly, there's a very, very sad time when he's sacked.
Yeah.
In 1978, and that was goddamn hard to read, because when you follow the story, you know how he feels about the club, and you get to the end of that book and feeling like he's just a fellow Celtic guy almost on the bus with you, and you see how they treat him, and you see the promises that they gave him. And well, one thing I'll touch on, right? There's loads of stuff that I've not told you about there, but the disgusting way he was taught, trained and kind of left at that point, if you like. Even after all of that, he never badmouthed the club.
No. Well, that was when the time when he was offered 30 grand. I think it was weeks after he'd been sacked. Really treated very badly, and this guy comes out and saying, give you 30 grand to do a story for the Sunday Mail. He remembered his name till the day he died as well. And the guy that came round, and he said, he'd been treated really shamefully. Because at first it wasn't even like they treated him shamefully twice. He demoted him in '76.
Yes, and I skipped over that.
When he was away, they made the decision when he was manager. Celtic were still top of the league at the time, and they made this decision well in advance that they were going to replace him as assistant. I think they had doubts about whether Jock Stein could ever come back the same way, and they thought we need a younger man in. But they let him go away on holiday, and they made the appointment while he was away, so they didn't have the decency to tell him. So he comes back and finds that his job's no longer there, that he's been given to David McParland. And even then, he's offered manager's jobs at Ayr United, who were a Premier League team at the time, Olympiacos, and he still stays, even though he's been treated terribly as Celtic's chief scout. Brings in Paul McStay, Packy Born, all these kind of guys.
Aye.
And then, again, they promised him a testimonial. He says he's got a job for life. 1978, they just dump him, and
Jock Stein got the testimony, didn't he? But
Jock Stein,
they talk about a joint testimonial for them.
I like the kind of Bobby Lennox, Jimmy Johnson thing. And again, you'd think that Sean would be, as I mentioned, how emotional. You think he would be emotional about that and kind of tearful or bitter or upset about it. He wasn't. He would always turn around and say, they treated me terrible, but the way they treated Jock was even worse and everything. And he felt they'd been really sneaky about with Jock, because I know there's a theory. Billy McNeil was one of the ones that put it across that Jock Stein basically it was all a plan almost, that Jock Stein kind of almost engineered it to go to Leeds and to get away. He realised he had to step aside, but he gets testimonial and then he got away. Billy McNeil thought that Jock had this plan, and Sean said no, that they were very clever with him, and they made it that he was going to become this kind of director of football type. And then they gave him the Pools offer, knowing that he couldn't accept it, knowing that he couldn't, his pride couldn't stomach it, and so he ended up, they got rid of him without needing to sack him, basically. So Sean always turned it on its head. But the funny thing, I don't know if you're going to ask, was that I didn't realise that there was a bit of distance in between Sean and Jock at that time. He always thought there was this friendship and this partnership that couldn't be split. And I think again it leaves readers to kind of make their own mind up about, you know, Jock Stein's role at that time. And one thing I was really keen to do in the book was not to build up Sean by knocking down Jock Stein, or to you know, to do anything that would damage that, and to kind of say that you know, Sean was the brains in this operation or anything. And Sean was always really keen for that himself, was to make it so obvious how much the strengths that Jock Stein had that he didn't. But yeah, it was a shame in them, because it really did cost their friendship for a little bit of a time. There wasn't having a big massive fallout like Clough and Taylor, but there was definitely a distancing for a couple of years. Unfortunately, it was repaired before the end.
I like the quote at that time where they said there was this: "You do what's best for the club, not yourself." That's what they said at that time.
It's always the club. And that's what happened there. Just when I was really struggling to understand why is he not turning in these guys, this is a joke, you know, you're really angry about how the board's behaving, and he nails it, and it nails his character. He says, as far as I was concerned, that was individuals treating me badly, not Celtic. The club has always been bigger than any directors, any players and any manager. It's just this separate entity, this Celtic thing that we struggle to try and, you know, describe to other fans from around the world. Why are you so obsessed about them? There's this intangible thing about them, and it doesn't matter who the manager is or the player is. And he knew, he nailed it. You know,
Sean had grown up with that. I mean, he, as well as the Jimmy Menemy sending over a Celtic, just Jimmy Menemy sent over the story of the Celtic, which he said he's read, and that was all about how the club was formed, obviously by a Sligo man, which helped him fall in love with it, Billy Walford, and about how, you know, it was all about charity and, you know, doing things in the right way and his principles, and that's what he loved. And that, you're right, he felt Celtic was much bigger than Desmond White or Jimmy Farrell or the guys on the board that time. He felt that Celtic went right back to Brother Walford, and even he wrote a newspaper column when he was a player, he wrote about Celtic history. I mean, could you imagine like a Celtic player doing that these days? You know,
exactly.
Like,
you want me to what?
You know, he dedicated part of his newspaper column every week. He'd do a little bit on Celtic history, a wee, you know, part about whatever Patsy Gallagher or back to Brother Walford and things. Incredible, you know. And like I say, his love was so genuine. It wasn't at all, you know, put on for the fans or anything. He didn't have a bad word to say about Celtic at all.
Aye.
And he felt bad even when he was sacked. That was what he said. He felt bad that the club's links with Sligo had been broken, because it went right back to.
That's right.
to
Never think about himself.
Yeah.
Aye. Remarkable. Right, guys. I'm going to bring us to a wee close here. Enjoyed it? Enjoyed the chat? Aye, good stuff, great insights. I'll close with an apology, because I did try and convince Stephen this would be running about an hour. It's double that, and to be perfectly frank, with all my notes, it could have been 5 times that. And
I think I'm responsible. I've been the one that's been going on for the most of it.
It's your fault. It's your fault. This goddamn book as well, because those notes were heavily edited.
All the notes they did about the book.
That's true. That's true. You're right.
So
I'm glad you backed me up on that one. So let's wind it up with how you feel. You know, you've brought it to a close. How do you feel about Sean as a man? Your feelings around the fact that obviously he sadly passed away before he could see it. Your own story. That I think that was nice how you touched upon it, because you set out with something in mind that you wanted to trumpet his story, but you changed, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, because really just through speaking to his family, you know, I'd be going up to interview them and I'd say, you know, he's not known for the way he should be known, and he should be given a greater status, and you know, and they'd say, yeah, I suppose so, you know, like, maybe you're right, you know, and they were totally non-committal. For that, I was thinking, you know, why aren't you more passionate about this, like, you know, getting his status up and getting him known as one of the giants of football in that era. And as I say in the book, I actually became frustrated with Sean at sometimes, because he was so humble, you know, and I just thought, the reason why people don't know you for such a great is because you haven't told people, you know, you haven't made it clear to people everything you've done. But I say it was at that point I thought, why you want to change this man? You know, this man is just a treasure the way he is, because he is humble. You don't want, you know, if it's funny, there's a lot of quotes people were asking me, like when I was away in Sligo, were there people you interviewed, he didn't use any of their quotes and you felt bad about it, and was saying, yeah, there's guys like even like big names like Davy Moyes interviewed, didn't use any of his quotes in the book.
Right.
And it's funny, Charlie Nicholas, who I know is not a universally popular figure with Celtic fans, but he came out with a great quote, I thought, and I didn't use it, but because he didn't work directly with him, and I thought it's maybe not as relevant. But he said, you know, there's a lot of football managers out there, a lot of guys who are known, you know, and revered throughout football. He said, but it's not a lot of men like Sean Fallon, you know, and that's what I came away with, was that basically it wasn't worth, you know, he could be known a lot more, but he wouldn't have been the same man. And really, and Danny McGrain said something similar, that he wouldn't have liked him become Celtic manager because he would have had to change what Sean Fallon was. And genuinely, having, you know, spent the time I did with him, he was such a great and good man. You know, he really just someone that you could, you know, say to anyone growing up, whatever, anyone that's an example for you to aspire to, you know, and everything about him, you know, like I say, I was going through the book, and you're always, because I came to be very fond of him, obviously, and you're researching things, you're thinking, am I going to find something here that I don't like, or am I going to speak to someone here that tells me something that disappoints me? And honestly, there was nothing that was left out, or nothing that I came across. He always grew and grew and grew in my estimation. And I'm really sorry he's not here to see it, but I know his family were brilliant all the way through, and they were reading it, because it was all researched and interviewed before he died, but most of the writing was done after, so they were reading it, you know, and the feedback they were giving me was just brilliant. And regardless how it does, you feel that if you've given the family something, because I say his youngest grandkids, he's 20 grandkids, some of them, you know, under the age of 5, one of them was born just after he died, they can grow up reading that and be very, very proud, you know.
And the one of the funny things, that if I say the name Justin Bieber, because when he was at Flag Day and everybody seen him and loads of his grandkids and stuff, why is everybody going bananas about, what was it, Papa? What did they call it? Was it Papa?
Yeah,
why are they going bananas? They're treating him like Justin Bieber.
Because it was a total eye-opener. I mean, you think about it, you know, he retired, finished at Dumbarton in the early 80s.
Yep.
You know, I think his first grandchild was born in the mid to late 80s, you know, so they missed it all, you know, and so for them, you know, they make it the odd, you know, old player saying, no, your Papa was this, your Papa was that, but to see him on the pitch at Celtic Park, you know, the fans singing and autographs and all, it was just a total revelation to them, and that was what was special. And I know the family were really grateful for that, you know, a lot of time nice things are only said after someone dies. And they said that was a great thing that they had, things like Flag Day and his 90th birthday and everything, that people did get to celebrate him before he died, you know, and that was a great thing. But I hope, I mean, it's a great story, you know, regardless of my involvement, it was always going to be a great story. I mean, I would have been the first in the queue to buy a copy, whoever else wrote it. And I hope, because, you know, there's so much fuss about, you know, like whatever Alex Ferguson's book and things come out, and you think, well, this guy had the ultimate perspective on Celtic's history for, you know, close on 3 decades, and the most interesting, successful, fascinating decades you can imagine, and
incredible.
You know, in fact,
it's absolutely a total love affair. It's an eye-opening love affair. It's a fascinating love affair, and it's stuff you just did not have half a clue about. It's remarkable, and no, you've done a fantastic job, sir. Credit to you. Now, where can all the guys buy it? Because hopefully we've teased them enough. The book is called Sean Fallon, Celtic's Iron Man, the Authorised Biography. The author is Stephen Sullivan. We've got a hardback book here. Is that the only format? Is it in Kindles?
No, it's in all e-formats. So basically, I think the guys at Backpage are all quite keen to get all these electronic formats. And,
so Amazon,
the
Backpage press guys obviously are the publishers.
I know Celtic Parkhead, no?
Yep, they've got in all the Celtic shops. I mean, Celtic were very much on board. I mean, you know, and they were a great help all the way through. So it's all the Celtic shops, all the major bookshops and everything, and Celtic Quick News are also selling it through their site.
So they are, yes, that's right. I've seen the adverts. That's right.
If you want to give your money not to a bookshop, you know, you can go to Celtic Shop, or you can go through Celtic Quick News, you know. So.
Brilliant. And for following yourself on Twitter with the book and so on for updates?
Yeah, there's a site for the book, a Twitter page for that. It's called Sean Fallon Celt, and that's been going. It really started to kind of get wee ideas and just to get people. So we started up an email address, and we got some nice wee stories through it. And one of the Ibrox disaster kind of things came through that, and also we just put up wee pictures, and you know, people can kind of get information, and it's been great. And as we said about the photos, I mean, there's so many great photos of Sean up there, so you can just keep them kind of coming along. And I don't know, when people were saying, you know, now the book's out, would you kind of wind it down? I don't really know. I've enjoyed doing it. That way, it's been a pleasure.
One hell of a journey. Now, for the book itself, I'm going to ask you for your approval on 2 things, see how you feel. Number 1, can I ask you to autograph this? Number 2, the club, Carluke Shamrock, they run loads and loads of events for charity, as Peter knows, the president of the club, sportsmen's dinners, dinner dances, etc. if it's okay with yourself, once you autograph it, I would like to hand this to the President and ask him to put that in and hopefully make some of the money through to the coffers.
Of course.
Okay?
I'm sure I'm thoroughly approve as well, I'm sure. I'm just...
Definitely.
I'm sorry he's not allowed to sign it for you, but...
Self. Hey, come on. Second best, the boy for FIFA. Hey! One in right at the end. Now, while you're doing that, I'm a good man, I'll pass it over to you. I'll get the boys to shout out the last hail hail. Round the table, we have had the lovely Mr Sanderson, pillar of the community, and the brothers Grimm, the Conley boys, Brian and Peter. So from all of us in Tic Talk, hope you've enjoyed it, hope you buy the book. Hail, hail.
Hail, hail, hail.
The thing I want to see the most is the Glasgow Celtic score. I've been to Munich, been to Paris and Berlin. I watched injustice fall upon you in Turin, and I've shared the pain and glory with the friends that I have made as I dance from place to place in green and white on a worldwide tin parade.